Dinosaurs, big ancient bugs, creepy spiders, and scary insects are all cute animals compared to the monsters that lived on Earth about 500 million years ago. For example, here's a creature that swam in the water like a stingray and had 3 eyes. Its mouth was like a pencil sharpener. 2 long claws with forked tips like pincers protruded from its head, and its gills were somewhere in the back. This is not a thing from a sci-fi movie. This is Mosaura. Its remains are preserved in excellent condition. Let's look at it more closely and study other similar monsters. The Cambrian explosion. Remember this name. This period is also called the biological Big Bang, the time when a huge number of different living creatures began to appear in the ocean, large, small, and tiny. The ancestors of almost all modern animal groups were most likely born during the Cambrian explosion, which lasted from 541 to 485 million years ago. It was a time when the first truly effective and terrifying predators appeared on Earth. One of them was Mosaura. It's only the size of an index finger, but you would never want to meet such a creature while swimming in the sea. It's scary to imagine what it could do with its pencil sharpener-shaped mouth. And you probably wouldn't be able to hide from it because, come on, it had 2 eyes on the sides and 1 big eye on its forehead. Mosaura belonged to a group of arthropods. Scientists called it a sea moth since it reminded them of a moth. This thing used a flap-like apparatus similar to wings to float in the water like a stingray. This monster was quite creepy, but its appearance may seem familiar because it's a distant relative of modern spiders, crabs, centipedes, and moths. Scientists found several 506 million-year-old Mosaura fossils, but unlike many other similar finds, these ones have been preserved in excellent condition. The found fossils showed sharp claws, a toothy jaw, and large gills in the tail section. Some parts of the fossil were so clear that they revealed the details of the creature's internal anatomy, including parts of its nervous and circulatory systems and digestive tract. It had jointed limbs like those of modern insects and crustaceans. When this monster swam in the sea, it probably grabbed its prey with long spiked claws sticking out of its head. Many Mosaura relatives have claws covered with multiple spikes, which help them grab food. But that ancient creature had smooth claws forked at the tips. That is, it grabbed the prey with those tongs, using them like chopsticks, and then brought it to its mouth. Of course, this is an assumption, and nobody saw how this creature actually did it. Unlike many other similar animals, Mosaura's posterior segmented body was studded with gills. Scientists don't know why this was necessary, but they assume that such an unusual breathing system helped to adapt to an environment with low oxygen content. Perhaps Mosaura led a very active reproductive lifestyle that required high oxygen consumption. Creepy, dangerous, and reproducing fast. An excellent set of qualities for one of the most dangerous predators of antiquity. But what did Mosaura eat? It probably caught different types of worms and small arthropods. It's nice to think that this monster lived so long ago and was so small. But what if this creature was the size of a shark and was swimming in the ocean these days? Perhaps it would become a dominant dweller, and people would swim much less along the coast. Mosaura lived in the water but was discovered in the Burgess Shale Rock Formation in the Canadian Rockies. Many mountains on Earth were once the seabed inhabited by strange creatures. One of them was Opabinia. It had 5 eyes, a mouth facing backward, a long trunk and claws instead of a nose. Wait, what? It's too strange even for science fiction, even for outer space. In its eccentricity, Opabinia was perhaps the loneliest creature on Earth. Scientists couldn't find another species that would be similar to this individual until recently. Meet Utaurora. It seems to belong to the same species as Opabinia. Its inch-long body was divided into 14 to 15 furrows. Each of them ended in a pointed flap. Opabinia had the same body, but it's unlikely that both monsters were friends. The difference between their timelines was several million years. It's hard to imagine why these monsters needed such strange body structures. Why haven't modern filmmakers used the design of those animals to create cool space monsters yet? Okay, they were creepy creatures, but what about weird and kinda useless ones? Scientists have discovered Su, a legless creature with no head turned inside out. Huh? This 444 million year old creature was found in South Africa, north of Cape Town. They called it Su after the discoverer's mother. In fact, it's some kind of new arthropod species that may have lived in low oxygen waters. This creature was turned inside out, and the outer shell with the legs and head was lost. Thanks to mineralization, muscles, tendons, and even Su's intestines were preserved on the fossil. It's a great success to find such detailed remains of an ancient creature. However, scientists still can't determine the evolutionary history of this species. They're sure that it was a primitive marine arthropod. Okay, we can see that 500 million years ago, Earth was filled with creepy monsters, which fortunately are now extinct. But what about trees? Were they the same as we see now? Or was there something else? Something creepy? Oh yeah. Scientists have discovered a new kind of living organism similar to a tree or a mushroom. It was gigantic and had a very minimalistic design. Meet the Prototaxities. It's basically just a big stick with a round end poking out of the ground. It was smooth, didn't have the usual tree bark, and looked more like a mushroom without a cap. But scientists have recently found out that it wasn't a mushroom at all. Prototaxities probably belonged to a previously unknown branch of life. Prototaxities is considered to be the first giant organism in the history of the planet that lived on land. It existed about 420 to 375 million years ago during the Devonian period. It was the time when plants began to spread across dry land, forming large forests. Over time, they began to grow leaves and form roots in the ground. Then, the first seed plants appeared. The real colonization of land began. The first arthropods, such as centipedes, arachnids, and other unpleasant creatures, began to walk among those forests. Meanwhile, the water was filled with a huge biodiversity. There was a giant supercontinent on the planet, and smaller parts began to break off it. During this period, Prototaxities towered over the land. Some of these things reached 26 feet high and 3 feet wide. It's like a 3-story house and as thick as a palm tree. But what was it? A plant? A mushroom? Algae, perhaps? Scientists discovered them in the middle of the 19th century, but only in 2007 did they conduct chemical analysis. Research showed that it was most likely a giant mushroom, but in 2025, scientists refuted this conclusion. It turns out this may have been an unknown life form that existed separately from the kingdom of fungi, animals, plants, and protists. Scientists noticed that the inner part of Prototaxities consisted of a number of tubes. There are similar tubes inside mushrooms, but the tubes of that ancient living thing branched and joined differently. They even had a different chemical composition. The main building block of mushrooms is chitin, but the Prototaxities contained chemicals similar to lignin, a substance found in the bark of trees and other plants, and its anatomy differs from the structure of any other organism known to us. What were they doing on Earth? Just chilled and enjoyed the bloom of life? Did they produce some kind of fruit, like a banana with eyes and claws? Scientists don't know. What if it was something that was brought to Earth from outer space? What if they were flowers planted by another civilization? What do you think?
Ooh, from giant spiders to venomous snakes, we all get freaked out by Australian creatures. Yeah, me too. But newly discovered fossils show that things were way more dangerous 120 million years ago, when this land was completely ruled by massive razor-clawed Megaraptors. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't around then. These dinosaurs were about 26 feet long and walked on 2 legs, just like the famous T-Rex. They were fast, fierce hunters, with a superpower: their hug. Yep, their massive, muscular forearms had huge curved claws, perfect for grabbing and holding onto prey. Uh-oh. They would wrap their arms around their poor victims, just like a hug, and trap them with no chance of escape. And even though their teeth were quite small, they were still sharp enough to rip through flesh. The first time we heard about Megaraptors was in the late 90s, when a paleontologist discovered their fossils in the region of Patagonia, Argentina. Since then, no one has ever found a complete skeleton, only fragments. But probably the most important one yet was uncovered in Australia at the beginning of this year. Researchers were exploring Victoria's stunning coastline when they stumbled upon Megaraptor fossils. First, they spotted bones from its lower legs and a few vertebrae washed up on the beach. Even though they were working with just a couple of fragments, a deeper analysis confirmed that these belonged to a Megaraptor. And not just any Megaraptor, it was the oldest one ever discovered. This discovery gets even more exciting because it adds weight to the theory that these dinosaurs might have originated in Australia. But we already knew that they roamed the land down under since early 2023, when researchers found the top of a Megaraptor skull in the country. So let's rewind a bit. We first found their remains in Argentina, right? Right. But then, years later, researchers found fossils of the same family of dinosaurs on the other side of the world, in Australia. If the ones in Oceania were older, how did these creatures end up in South America? Of course, they didn't fly there. They didn't cross continents by swimming either, although there is a theory that they could swim. Remember, we're talking about the dinosaur era, which happened millions of years ago. And back then, Australia and Argentina were actually pretty close. Basically, they were one. Both lands were part of the supercontinent known as Gondwana, and they were connected through Antarctica. Wait, but wasn't this path freezing? I mean, yeah, these dinos had to pass through Antarctica to get to their destination, but they weren't freezing their tails off. This all happened during the mid-Cretaceous period, when the weather was super warm. Back then, the poles were covered in plants, not ice. So let's just say they took full advantage of the good weather to make the crossing. Now, about 180 million years ago, Gondwana started to break apart. At some point, Australia drifted away from the supercontinent, cutting it off from other landmasses, including South America. That's why the same dinosaurs showed up in completely different parts of the world. Mystery solved. Now, let's get back to that recent discovery. The researchers didn't just find a few traces of Megaraptors on the beach. In total, they uncovered 250 dinosaur bones at the site, but only 5 of them were really important. They belong to 3 different species of dinosaurs that, as it turns out, all lived in Victoria at the same time. So yeah, we've already talked about those first 2 bones. They were from the Megaraptor. Next, we have a shin bone from a Onenlagiine. That's my best shot at pronouncing it. It's a dino also known as the southern raptor. This is a type of dromaeosaur with a long snout. And the last 2 shin bones of different sizes came from a Carcharodontosaurus, whose name means shark-toothed lizard. This one is a particularly big deal for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the first evidence that this species lived in Australia. And number 2, it was small, and that is pretty surprising since we've always thought of this species as being massive. Fossils found in Argentina, for example, show this dinosaur reached a length of about 36 feet. But the one in Australia was much smaller, measuring only around 6 to 10 feet long. And that's still plenty big. Basically, what we're saying is that the way predators were ranked in these 2 parts of the world was completely different. In South America, Carcharodontosaurs grew to massive T-Rex-sized giants, towering over Megaraptors and dominating the landscape. But in Australia, it was the complete opposite. There, huge, powerful Megaraptorids roamed the land alongside smaller Carcharodontosaurs. So the predator dynamic was different. And all of this just shows how unique the ecosystem in Victoria was back then. Although isolated dinosaur bones have been found in Western and South Australia, most of the fossils come from the eastern part of the country, like Queensland. And there, researchers dug up something really, really rare: a well-preserved dinosaur skull. The study shows that this bone belonged to the 4th discovered specimen of Titanosaur. This group includes those massive long-necked dinosaurs. They look like the Brachiosaurus, but some of them were even bigger, reaching 120 feet long. The skull, discovered in 2018, belongs to this guy, whose pronunciation is above my pay grade. and the research points out that it roamed the Earth around 98 million years ago. Thanks to this find, scientists were able to recreate for the very first time what its face might have looked like. Probably after checking out the illustration, they thought, hey, it looks a lot like its cousin. They were talking about another species of Titanosaur, this other unpronounceable guy. And guess where they used to live? Yep, in Argentina. So, this research also supports the theory that dinosaurs crossed between South America and Australia during the mid-Cretaceous period. Now, this wasn't the only secret buried in Queensland, though. In 2024, researchers working there discovered the fossilized remains of a new species of pterosaur, about 100 million years old. These creatures were the first vertebrates that could actually fly, existing alongside dinosaurs. They were massive, powerful predators, with wingspans of up to 36 feet. But these remains belong to a new species within the pterosaur group, which they have named Kuna or something similar. Compared to their cousins, they were on the smaller side, with a wingspan of about 15 feet. Still, that's bigger than a snowy albatross, the largest flying bird we have today. This species of pterosaurs were terrifying beasts, flying over the ocean to hunt for prey. Once they spotted their victim, they'd snap open their 60-centimeter jaws, filled with sharp spike-like teeth, and, well, I guess there was no escaping that. The last incredible discovery we're talking about today also comes from Queensland. For over 20 years, students walked past a plain-looking rock at Biloela State High School completely unaware that it held 66 dinosaur footprints, and they date back about 200 million years. These prints were made by a group of these Latin-named guys. They were small dinosaurs with 3 toes on each foot, and it seems like they were all over Queensland around that early Jurassic period. The rock they found at the school worked like a snapshot, giving us a better idea of what these dinosaurs were like and how they behaved. After taking a closer look, researchers found that the footprints came from 47 individual dinosaurs. This group was probably walking along or maybe crossing a waterway when their footprints got marked in the white clay. And the study also discovered that they were likely moving at less than 4 miles per hour at the time. So we only discovered those marks in Australia. But fossils of the same species found in other countries showed that they had these long legs, a big chunky body, short arms, and this tiny head with a beak. But honestly, they don't sound as scary when you realize they only ate plants. Whew.
We all love unicorns, those legendary creatures famous for their beauty. You're now thinking of a white horse with a spiraling horn on its forehead, and there's probably a rainbow somewhere nearby. But what are the origins of this image? And more importantly, can it be true? Well, yes and no. Let us start from the beginning. The name. It comes from Latin. Unicorn translates as one horn. Today, there is one land animal that fits the bill, the rhinoceros. The Greek name for a unicorn is monoceros, which again means one horn. So it all fits neatly. But wait, isn't a unicorn a kind of horse? We need to call in science to resolve the issue. Scientists have discovered a skull of an animal that could have been the real unicorn and roamed the Earth some 30,000 years ago. The animal resembled a huge, hairy rhinoceros, nothing like the image of a unicorn we have today. It was 2 times heavier than a giraffe, and its diet consisted of grass, a lot of grass. But the skull the scientists found in Central Asia revealed another surprising fact: the animal's age. Previous research pointed to the fact that the species went extinct 350,000 years ago. This meant that our ancestors never shared the same living space with this oversized rhinoceros. But the skull was dated much later. This dates the animal right around the time when humans were already there. This is where the legend begins. Imagine you're a prehistoric human who had just seen a unicorn. What would you do? It's not like you can take out a smartphone and snap a picture of it. No, you would probably paint it on a cave wall. Such drawings have survived to the present day. In France, there's an image of an animal that seems to have a single horn. It's in the Hall of the Bulls. All the other animals there have two wavy horns, but the mysterious spotted animal has two lines on its head. Do these double lines represent a single horn? Is this the famous unicorn? Perhaps. The name of the drawing is the Unicorn Panel. But images of unicorns don't only exist in cave drawings. In the Indus Valley, scientists have found various seals featuring a mythical animal with a single horn. Ancient Greek writers believed that unicorns lived in India. Back then, this region of the world was exotic to them. Although ancient Greeks never saw a unicorn, they had a pretty detailed description of the animal. They even recorded that the meat from this creature had a bitter taste. But was it a horse or a rhinoceros? Neither. For Greeks, the unicorn was a kind of a donkey. Go figure. In Chinese mythology, there's a similar creature. Its name translates into English, means male-female. The animal's description resembles a unicorn. A single horn on its forehead, the tail of an ox, and the body of a deer. It feeds on vegetation, just like the ancient rhinoceros from Central Asia. When the first giraffe was presented to the Ming Emperor, they described it as a unicorn. The ruler concluded that the animal definitely wasn't the mythical unicorn, but the legend lived on in that part of the world. The modern Japanese word for giraffe comes from the Chinese word for the unicorn-like creature. Ancient Persians also knew about the existence of unicorns. There's a picture of a unicorn in their capital city, but the fun part is that it has two large wings. Seems odd, but the Persians also never saw a unicorn in person. For them, like for the Greeks, it was a being that lived outside the known world. That's the reason why we're so fascinated by unicorns today. We find accounts of such creatures in the writings of Aristotle and even Julius Caesar. These famous people claimed that animals resembling unicorns lived in the forests of Germany. The modern image of a unicorn originated in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in Europe. People back then had quite the imagination. They showed unicorns in book decorations. According to ancient scribes, this animal was ferocious. Its main enemy was the elephant. The people in medieval times thought highly of an animal they had never seen. It was quick and dangerous, so it needed to be hunted down. But how on earth do you lure a unicorn? With the help of a fair maiden, of course. This sounds strange today, but keep in mind that the Dark Ages were a peculiar period in history. Back then, doctors used leeches as legit medical treatment. The perfect setting for the myth about the unicorn. The story gets wilder. A maiden would go inside a forest. A unicorn would spot her and jump inside her lap. After it fell asleep, hunters would appear. They would then capture the unicorn and take it to the king. But why were Europeans impressed by the unicorn? Because of its horn. They believed that it had magical power. A unicorn's horn could detect poison in food and drinks. When you ground it into a powder, the horn had the power to whiten teeth. These were just some of the magical traits given to a unicorn's horn. The folklore was so strong that Europeans even had a backup for the times they couldn't get their hands on a real horn. That must have happened quite often, and they used real narwhal horns as a replacement. These are whales with a large, tusk-like tooth coming from their mouth. In England, the unicorn was a symbol of something you could never see or catch. In the 16th and 17th centuries, it became associated with imagination. That's when the rainbow came into the picture. The Victorians were the first to connect the symbol of a rainbow to the unicorn. Its first appearance in fantasy literature was in the novel Through the Looking Glass for young readers. That was the sequel to Lewis Carroll's more famous work, Alice in Wonderland. The unicorn now stood for hope and purity. Still, there were no recorded sightings of the animal in real life. At least none that could be confirmed by science. In 1663, a German scientist claimed to have found a unicorn skeleton. The story seemed too good to be true, and it was. Someone made the skeleton from the bones of various animals and tried to pass it off as a unicorn. Today, the fake skeleton is displayed in the local Natural History Museum. The people weren't gonna give up and searched for unicorns everywhere they went. In the 20th century, a British explorer discovered a new species in Africa. It had a small bump in the corner of its head. The public nicknamed the mysterious animal the African unicorn. But this wasn't true. Now we know this is an okapi. It's most closely related to a giraffe, but it looks like a zebra in the back part of its body, and its head resembles a deer. It's an impressive animal, but it's not even close to the elusive unicorn. One of the latest alleged sightings happened in 1991. An Austrian biologist reported seeing a unicorn in a forest in Germany. The legend says that these animals live in enchanted forests, but there's just one tiny issue: the total lack of physical evidence. In fact, there are historians who claim that unicorns never existed. The animal was simply a misinterpretation of cave drawings. Perhaps all of those ancient images of unicorns were just two horned animals shown from the side. It could be so. It's hard to add the third dimension to a 2D image. But then, in 2013, the unicorn reappeared. Not the animal, though the word. An American venture capitalist came up with the term to refer to startup companies with a value of over $1 billion. She chose this word because these companies are as rare as the mythical animal. There are only 1,000 of such enterprises in the whole world, and you've probably heard of the most famous one, Elon Musk's SpaceX.
When you think of an epic desert scene with blazing sun, endless dunes, and those magical little oases, you probably picture the legendary Sahara, right? But what if I tell you that 11,000 years ago, this vast expanse of hot sand looked totally different than it does today? Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't around then. But I'm told that back then, what we now call a desert was a lush paradise, brimming with lakes, rivers, grassy plains, and even woodsy forests. So, where did all this water go? There are many stories about the distant past of our planet when deserts were covered with jungles and forests. And then something happened, like changing climates or colossal earthquakes, and it all turned green lands into dunes. But how about a theory that Sahara became a desert because of humans and goats? The Sahara has seen its fair share of wet and dry drama throughout the ages, mostly thanks to little shifts in Earth's orbital tilt, causing variations in how much solar radiation hits the atmosphere. There were even times called the African humid periods, when the rain would pour in and transform the dry landscape into a bright green haven. But between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago, something really funky happened to this region. Certain areas went from humid to dry way too fast to explain it by just orbital changes. In the blink of an eye, the lush Sahara turned into the Sahara we know today. Now, if you ask scientists why it happened, they will tell you, oh, it's just poor parameterization of the data. Bet you didn't get it, did you?
What?
Well, right, let me translate it from scientific to common human. It means they really don't know the answer themselves, and they got a bunch of missing puzzle pieces. But as scientists sifted through ancient dirt and pollen samples, they spotted a quirky trend. Wherever there were pastoralists, also known as humans with their domesticated animals, the plant life seemed to shift. It was as if every time humans and their furry friends meandered through the greenery, they turned it into scrub and desert right behind them. Oops. Yep, chances are that by overgrazing, humans were sapping moisture out of the atmosphere, since plants give off moisture, which helps make clouds and making things even sunnier, leading to a quicker end of the humid vibes. Plus, our ancestors may have been getting a little too cozy with fire for land management, further speeding up the desert takeover. Anyway, scientists are sure that this lush Sahara would have turned back into desert eventually, even if humans hadn't shown up, thanks to Earth's natural rhythms. So there's no need to pin this abrupt change solely on humans. It could simply be about nature getting feedback from vegetation and dust cycles. It's difficult to determine what caused these changes, as it's all interconnected. During the last humid period, the Sahara was filled with hunter-gatherers. As things got a little drier, they started herding animals for food. The weather pushed people to herd cattle. It's also possible that grazing sped up the landscape degradation. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or in this case, the human or the cow? It's tough to tell with the evidence we have now. Now today, it's safe to say that water is no longer that big of a problem in the Sahara, even though it's a huge desert and the times of lush forests there are long gone. But technology's got us covered. For example, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, the biggest underground water stash on the planet. It's nestled beneath the Sahara Desert's eastern edge and stretches across 4 northeastern African countries – Sudan, Chad, Libya, and Egypt, covering a whopping 770,000 square miles and holding around 36,000 square miles of groundwater. Just look at the pipes transported when it was being built. It's the world's largest irrigation project. No wonder it's feasible to thrive in the Sahara today. But imagine thriving in the Sahara Desert with just one water source. Sounds like a tough gig, right? But the ancient Garamantes did just that, surviving and even thriving for nearly 1,000 years without monsoons or rivers flowing to their desert paradise. These clever folks were the trendsetters of urban life in the sands, and even the Romans couldn't help but notice their genius. While many thought they were just desert-dwelling savages, the Garamantes were busy building an empire in one of the toughest climates on Earth. But how did they do that? Well, they got crafty and dug a whole bunch of underground tunnels to tap into a massive sandstone aquifer. They were literally squeezing every drop of life from under the dunes. But recently, research showed that the Garamantes weren't just hardworking, they were pretty lucky too. The Garamantes had an underground aquifer that brought water up to a hill where they built over 500 fogaras, which are irrigation systems, some stretching as long as 2.5 miles. It was like sipping water through a straw, which let them irrigate their crops for nearly a century, especially since even a little rain would help recharge the system. But eventually, due to rain insufficiency, the aquifer ran low, and reaching it again would have meant digging more tunnels and relying on more people. That's a tough problem, considering these people were in the middle of food and water shortages. Guess I don't need to tell you what happened to the Garamantes, do I? The fall of the Garamantian culture might be linked to several factors. It may have been due to climate changes, or they may have simply used their water resources too much. Back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually fertile agricultural land, thanks in part to the cool irrigation system the Garamantians created. But since fossil water isn't something you can replenish over time, the groundwater levels dropped pretty low. This likely played a big role in the kingdom's decline by the late 7th century CE. That sounds like someone who hit a lottery jackpot, used up all the money, and went back to their original not-so-cool job once the bank account got fully drained. Oh, by the way, even if the Garamantes left some secret wisdom messages for us, the chances are we'll never get what they wanted to tell us. Nobody really knows what language they used, and their texts are nearly indecipherable to us today. But let's go back to the Green Sahara. So it transformed into a desert about 4,500 years ago. But today, we can understand how people lived in those times in the Sahara thanks to natural parks in Africa that have the ultimate outdoor art gallery. There are well over 15,000 ancient paintings and carvings depicting everyday life from around 11,000 years ago. However, if the carvings aren't enough for you and you feel like visiting an actual green desert, all you have to do is book a flight to California. One of the most beautiful phenomenon in the world, the superbloom, takes place here. Look at all these colors – orange, green, pink. It's a miracle. Wildflowers bloom right in the middle of a hot desert after several years of rainfall in dry places. It's such a bright and colorful landscape that superblooms can be seen from space. This rare phenomenon can be observed in other arid places and deserts in western and southern Africa, Western Australia, and Chile. In all these places, the weather is very hot and dry in summer. Mild humid air comes in winter, and this is the ideal environment for mass flowering. Flower seeds that lie in desert sands can wait for decades before starting to produce flowers. When the hot sun destroys all the weeds and grass, and the rainfall becomes enough to moisten the soil, the seeds are kind of like, well, okay, now it's our turn to play a big game. And then hundreds of thousands of tourists come to take photos and post these beautiful pictures on social media. And this, unfortunately, is one of the main dangers for flowers. Therefore, if you find yourself in a place like this, don't pick the flowers and don't trample on them. Stay on the path, don't litter. Take only pictures and leave only footprints. You get it? Good.
It was the largest fish our Earth had ever seen, and its bite was strong enough to crush a car. The largest of its teeth found was the length of a remote control. It consumed about 2,500 pounds of food a day. That's like 3,300 cans of tuna for you. The earliest Megalodon fossils are from about 20 million years ago, but you won't see its skeleton, and that's because the mighty Meg had no bones. A skeleton made from bones gives most animals their body shape and strength. Sharks, though, come from the same subclass as rays, skates, and sawfish and have cartilage instead of bones. Cartilage is a tissue that is softer and more flexible than bones, but it's still tough enough to shape the body and protect the internal organs. Some areas are more flexible, since cartilage is weaker, and some, like the shark's head, are much tougher thanks to calcified cartilage. Their snouts, though, are made of really soft and flexible cartilage to work like a bumper in case of a collision with some dangers. Who knows if they'd be able to do all this with a heavy skeleton? Plus, cartilage makes their jaws more flexible, and they can open their mouths much wider than they would with a jaw made of bone. Our hero, Meg, was no exception, and it had the strongest bite of all living creatures, which was also made possible by a skeleton made of cartilage. Sharks take full advantage of their cartilage. It helps them swim and turn fast while hunting. One drawback of this type of skeleton is that it was really tricky for scientists to establish the shape and size of Meg. Normally, they would do it using fossilized bone skeletons or their parts. With Meg, they had to guess based on the teeth they found and comparisons with living relatives. A more recent 3D computer model was based partially on scans of a preserved spine discovered in the 1860s. The model showed that Meg was bigger, faster, and even hungrier than scientists had previously thought. Looks like an average megalodon was 52 feet long. That's slightly bigger than the height of the Hollywood sign and weighed 10 times as heavy as an elephant. There were also much bigger creatures. Scientists still aren't sure how the megalodon got this size. The fact that there were bigger and smaller Megs probably has to do with a little something called Bergmann's rule. It says that the temperature of the surrounding environment affects the animal's body size because they either need to conserve or shed heat. The megalodons that reached cooler waters probably needed more body weight to make sure they survived in low temperatures. Those living in warmer waters had to be smaller to avoid burning up. If the researchers were correct in their calculations, it also means that Meg reached a cruising speed of over 3 miles per hour, which is much faster than other sharks. The still-living great white shark can cover a distance of nearly 7,000 miles without stopping, which is 9/10 as long as the diameter of Earth. It looks like the megalodon could have gone much further. Megalodons managed to survive on our planet for nearly 70 times longer than humans have. They were roaming the oceans for around 20 million years, and you could see them pretty much anywhere except near the poles. Scientists discovered the most northern fossils off the coast of Denmark and the most southern in New Zealand. The reason why there were no megalodon teeth found in Antarctica is most likely that these adapted to only warm tropical and subtropical waters. The younger ones like to keep to the shores, while full-grown adults preferred coastal areas, but they could easily move into the open ocean as well. When our planet went through a period of global cooling and drying, and the seas began to freeze around 3.6 million years ago, there was less and less room for Meg to thrive. Much of their prey, like smaller whales, seals, and sea turtles, disappeared or relocated to waters that were too cold for our hero. And at the same time, the number of its natural competitors, like smaller predatory sharks, like the great white shark, and whales increased. This shifting food chain dynamics could have been even more dangerous for the Meg than the cold ocean water. You're used to seeing them on the big screen as heartless monsters, but these huge sharks were actually loving and caring family guys. Scientists discovered several Megalodon nursery areas in Florida, Maryland, Panama, and off the coast of Spain. It looks like they gave birth to their young in shallow water environments. Then, little Megs would stay there with adults protecting and raising them until they were ready to fight off predators. The mighty Meg had 276 teeth in 5 rows in its mouth. Similar to other sharks, it was fast in replacing its worn-out or lost teeth. With 4 or 5 rows of teeth in its mouth, it basically acted like a conveyor belt, able to grow back damaged or missing teeth. This means that an adult megalodon probably would have grown several thousand teeth throughout its lifetime. Although the great white shark is often mentioned as Meg's closest relative, they'd hardly be distant cousins. The ancestors of today's great white existed at the same time as the Meg, but they weren't best friends and even rivaled each other. The great white shark wouldn't win in a head-to-head fight with a Meg, but it was a better hunter using its smaller size and agility to snap up the giant's prey quickly. This only left the bigger fish and whales for the Meg, but its food supplies began to run out as the whales swam to the cooler new seas. Rather than a great white, the Megalodon is more like a modern bull shark. It had a short snout, a flat lower jaw, and huge pectoral fins to support its massive weight and size. We also speak of Meg as an extinct giant, but can we be 100% sure it isn't hiding somewhere as we speak? After all, we've only explored 5% of our oceans altogether. The Mariana Trench is the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, and you could dip the whole of Mount Everest in its deepest part, and over a mile of it would still be above the surface. If a megalodon or two needed a place to hide, that would be the perfect spot. It wouldn't be the coziest place to live though, with its cold water and total darkness. Plus, the pressure there is 1,000 times stronger than at sea level. So, if a Meg really were hiding down there, it would have serious issues with its teeth, because calcium would dissolve under that pressure. To survive here, it would also need to learn to navigate in complete darkness. That means it would have either become bioluminescent or evolve to grow massive eyes like the giant squid. If the Meg were still around and true to its dietary choices, it would have to eat smaller fish, and that would be a problem for us humans. Especially those of us who love fish, that is. And the ocean isn't cooling down these days. The Megalodon would love its temperature and would thrive and reproduce faster than ever. Those giants would create some massive problems for cargo ships and cruising vessels. In case you're now scared at the thought of meeting a Megalodon, relax. Most scientists don't think it's possible because of our hero's size. Most foods that megalodons like to eat live in shallow ocean areas and not in the deep, deep sea. Meg would need to come up for dinner every now and then, and it's kinda hard to miss a creature this big. They're both giant prehistoric creatures to us, but the megalodons and the dinosaurs never actually coexisted. The dinosaurs probably died out about 66 million years ago. Megalodons seem to have appeared a bit later.
A piece of whale rib has recently been found in a North Carolina mine. Not a big deal, some might think. Hey, why can't a whale be a miner, right? But this fragment offers scientists a unique glimpse at the interactions between prehistoric sharks and whales from around 3 to 4 million years ago. The thing is, 3 tooth marks embellish the rib. That means that the whale was once badly bitten by an animal with a super powerful jaw. Judging by the spacing between the tooth marks, and it reaches almost 2.5 inches. This animal could be a mega-toothed shark. I'm talking about the Megalodon. Or it could be a different shark species which was around at that time. The curvature of the shark's jaw shows that the animal was relatively small, between 13 and 20 feet long. Yeah, small. As for the whale, it seems to be the ancestor of a great blue or humpback whale. Researchers are amazed. You don't usually expect to find evidence of animal interaction and behavior preserved in the fossil record. After examining the sample carefully, they concluded that the shark must have gone away with a mouthful, but the whale had survived because most of the fossil fragment is covered with what is known as woven bone. It quickly forms in response to localized infection. Such bone isn't particularly strong, and later the body remodels it into compact bone tissue. But it takes time. The presence of this bone means that the healing was incomplete and the whale passed away 2 to 6 weeks after the unfortunate encounter. On the other hand, its demise could have been unrelated to the infection and injury. Only a handful of fossils show such kinds of interactions between ancient animals. You can often find bite marks on fossils indicating where the animal passed away and its carcass was scavenged. But this fossil is one of a few examples that not only show a wound inflicted by another animal, but also demonstrate that the prey survived. All fossils are exciting for paleontologists. Yes, they need to get out more. But some might look terrifying to regular people. For example, look at this picture of tentacle arms and octagonal-shaped heads. When it first appeared in mass media, internet users claimed that it was some ancient organism that had come from space. Others thought the story was fake, but in fact, both the picture and the fossil are real. The fossil is known as a mortality plate, a fossilized representation of a mass extinction event of one or several species. The fossil actually contains more than a dozen specimens of a type of marine organism called a crinoid. Despite their looks, crinoids were not plants but marine animals. This particular species lived deep underwater on the seafloor. Crinoids were related to starfish, sea urchins, and brittle stars. These creatures could attach themselves to the seafloor with stalks made up of flexible porous discs connected by soft tissue. The stalks were hollow, and that's where the animal's nervous system was located. Crinoids absorbed oxygen through thin-walled tube feet. The creatures usually reached the length of more than 8 inches and had 5 arms lined with leathery-looking tentacle-like structures. They fed on plankton and sloughed off organic material. Now, even though these fossil finds seem to be super exciting, few creatures in the fossil record confuse scientists as much as the Tully Monster. This curious sea creature sported a toothy, trunk-like snout and eyes splayed out on a rigid rod. But the most bizarre thing? It has been impossible to classify. Researchers have been considering a variety of organisms, for example, segmented worms, swimming slugs, and primitive eel-like creatures, since the monster was discovered in 1966. Recently, they have even tried to connect it to some species of jawless fish with a backbone-like structure. A team of scientists from Japan has used high-resolution laser scanners to examine the anatomy of Tully Monster fossils in 3D. They concluded that the enigmatic fossil might be an invertebrate after all, and still, the true identity of the creature remains elusive. In the 1950s, amateur fossil hunter Francis Tully found a ghostly imprint of a torpedo-shaped organism with a huge tail fin in the Mizon Creek fossil beds in Illinois. Tully had never seen anything similar to the torpedo structure. He took his find to Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Paleontologists working there were baffled as well. Since then, scientists haven't been able to determine where the creature fits on the phylogenetic family tree, or where they should spend Thanksgiving. In 1741, an explorer and captain named Vitus Johansen Bering led an expedition to map the coast of Alaska. The ship he was on got shipwrecked on what later became known as Bering Island, and they got hungry. Half the crew survived thanks to the discovery of an extremely large sea cow. With the meat of these animals nourishing them, the sailors managed to build a small ship from the wreckage and return home. On their way back, a scientist who was among them spent his time documenting the animals and plants they had found. The sea cow was particularly interesting because without it, the crew wouldn't have survived. These animals were more than 26 feet long and weighed around 10 tons. All sea cows are member of the order Sirenia, marine mammals more closely related to elephants than cows. The scientists described them as having black skin, a small head, and stubby forelimbs. Those sea cows floated on the water's surface, munching on kelp. After the information about these animals became widespread, sea otter fur trading expeditions made use of that convenient depot en route. Sea cows were docile and could be easily hunted. Long story short, within 27 years after the scientists mentioned those animals, they were driven to extinction. But it's not the saddest part. The fossil record reveals a much deeper and darker history. Fossils of sea cows have been discovered all over the world, from Japan to Mexico. It means that the animal once thrived in the vast kelp beds around the entire North Pacific Rim. That small population discovered by the expedition was probably the last remains of a once much larger and way healthier population. More likely, Aboriginal hunting had already reduced the numbers of these animals to near extinction levels, and the final blow came from Western hunters. The living close relatives of those ancient sea cows are rarely hunted today. Still, they're under threat of extinction themselves. To some, this amazing fossil might look a bit disturbing. Slaves' lentils are fossils that belong to animals called Nummulites. They lived and thrived in a warm, shallow sea covering part of Egypt around 40 million years ago. The name Nummulites hints at the fact that larger specimens resemble coins, and in Egyptian folklore, they're even referred to as angel's money. These creatures have a simple, single-celled structure, which contrasts with their super intricate skeleton. Look at this series of spiral overlapping whorls. Each whorl is divided into countless tiny chambers. Nummulites can grow to be 4 inches in diameter, and still, they are the fossils of single-celled animals related to amoeba. How and why did they grow to be so large? The reason could be their symbiotic relationships with other smaller organisms. In the case of modern species, such symbionts are tiny golden-brown single-celled algae called diatoms. The shells of Nummulites are relatively transparent, and since they're flat, there's a large surface area for the light needed for the diatoms to photosynthesize. For some reasons, scientists are still debating about them. The presence of plant symbionts in animals dwelling in the sea encourages the growth of a calcareous skeleton in hosts. So, the gigantic size of the Nummulites in Egypt could be due to their close relationship with symbiotic diatoms. Does that make sense? Fun fact: a species of Nummulites evolve very fast, and their fossils change from one layer of sediments to the next. So the limestone used for the pyramids of Giza are so packed with such fossils that it's known as Nummulitic limestone. This limestone also contains 2 kinds of Nummulites, the smaller slave's lentils and the larger angel's money. But those are not different species, but rather different stages in the life cycle of a single species. Boom! An explosion of supersonic waves, interplanetary heat, dust, fumes. The Earth's atmosphere has been invaded by a cosmic rock the size of Everest. A few seconds ago, this rock, weighing trillions of tons, was hurtling towards Earth. It could fly from New York to Anchorage faster than you could fry yourself an omelet. This monster's name? The Chicxulub incident. Epic name, right? 66 million years ago, it crashed into the Earth. Back then, dinosaurs ruled the planet, but not for long. The epic collision took place in modern Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, right near Cancun, where the dinosaurs were vacationing. Well, probably not. Still, the huge space rock hit the ocean, but even all that water couldn't stop the inevitable. The collision caused a huge amount of energy to be released. The horror on a planetary scale had begun. Imagine a mini-sun lighting up the surface of the Earth with tsunamis the height of the Statue of Liberty bursting from the epicenter of the watery impact. Not good. The blast blew through the surface of the Earth. It was as hot as an oven and burnt everything in its path. The impact provoked a colossal earthquake and serious volcanic activity. A bunch of volcanoes simultaneously released hot lava and ash into the prehistoric skies. Millions of tons of ash and soot poisoned the air. This formed a huge ash cloud in the atmosphere, which blocked out the sun's rays for several years. The long winter had begun. Only there wasn't any snow falling from the sky, but rain made of sulfuric acid. Yes, the Chicxulub incident might just be the most important thing that ever happened in the history of our planet. Even more than YouTube. Back then, there were loads of volcanic eruptions, a lot of flammable oxygen in the atmosphere, constant temperature changes. It was the perfect and worst time for all of this to go down. So, how are we so sure about all this? Well, the asteroid left an absolutely huge crater on the planet's surface. Today, this scar is hidden under the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists found a lot of places on Earth with abnormally high levels of iridium. This metal is very rare on Earth, but it's in a lot of asteroids that scientists have examined. Scientists studied some 66 million-year-old rocks. In the layers of rock, they found dust, the same dust that comes from asteroids. This could only have happened if a huge asteroid had crashed into Earth. The catastrophe led to the extinction of not only the dinosaurs, but also the asteroid. It was so hot at the point of impact, part of the asteroid just disappeared. A lot of water vapor and carbon dioxide shot up into the atmosphere. But the biggest problem, sulfur. It got kicked up by the asteroid impact and flew up into the air. These tiny sulfur particles blocked out a lot of the sun's rays. Without the sun, a lot of plants disappeared and the climate eventually got colder. The immense heat turned stones into glass. Scientists call these things tektites. The energy of the impact threw them up into the skies. After a short flight, the tektites fell down to Earth. But it wasn't pretty. Rain fell too, only instead of drops of water, you'd have seen hot glassy fireballs. They bombarded the planet's surface for days. The tektites set fire to everything. Scientists found evidence of this all over the world, not just near the collision site. But a lot of things from back then are still a mystery. Some scientists think that Chicxulub wasn't even an asteroid. It might have been a comet. Asteroids are mostly made of stone and metal. Most often they kind of look like a potato. A comet contains rock, metal, and ice. Comets look like dirty cosmic snowflakes, complete with ammonia, methane, and carbon dioxide. Comets sometimes come from the Oort cloud. It's a huge cloud of ice and debris around our solar system. From time to time, comets break free from the pack and head towards our sun. According to scientists, this special comet flew right past Jupiter. The gravity of that huge planet accelerated the comet even more. It flew towards the sun, gaining more and more speed. The comet's outer ice shield started to evaporate, and it probably gave off a lot of dust and gas, which made it look like it had a tail. The sun's gravity eventually shattered the comet apart. One of the fragments flew through space and crashed into the Earth 66 million years ago. So, asteroid or comet? The truth is, we'll never know. What we do know is that the Earth was seriously unlucky to be in its path, and it was never the same again. The catastrophe stopped the development of 75% of life on Earth. Some bigger marine animals, like crocodiles, turtles, and fish, survived the impact. Out of all land animals, the only ones to survive were the ones that were, on average, smaller than the modern raccoon. That includes a bunch of special species of dinosaurs, the ancient ancestors of birds. Scientists believe they survived for two reasons. After the huge impact, it took a long time for plants to start growing again, and a lot of animals didn't survive. Most remaining animals didn't have enough food. But these dinosaurs had a beak. With its help, they could split open nuts and dig seeds out of the soil, so they survived. The second reason is that these lucky guys had bigger brains. Some people think that they were able to cooperate with each other and quickly adapt to the new conditions. Other life forms survived too. Fungi and mold survived underground and underwater. Gradually, the darkness cleared away and ferns began to take over the lifeless landscape. After a few thousand years, forests started to reappear. The animals that survived were pretty much all inconspicuous and small creatures. They lived in burrows, safe from all that hot ash. Before the collision, mammals had lived in the shadow of dinosaurs. But with all the dinosaurs suddenly gone, things were about to change. Mammals were able to take over. They began to dominate life, at least on land. Back to the moment when everything changed. Turns out, it wasn't the size of the asteroid that made it so powerful. It was more about the angle in which it hit the Earth. If the angle of impact had been different, the dinosaurs might have even survived the catastrophe. So, what would that have looked like? Well, let's travel back, way back. Oh no, there's a giant asteroid heading for Earth. Oh, wait, never mind, it missed. Whew. There are plenty of earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions every day, But dinosaurs don't mind that much. No big deal. Fast forward a few million years, and most of these ancient lizards have changed and are now unrecognizable. Thanks to a couple of ice ages, many dinosaurs are now totally covered with feathers to protect them from the cold. Mammals exist, but they're few and far between. You see a lot of bats in caves. There are tons of rat-sized rodents in the forests. During the day, they hide in the undergrowth or in burrows. At night, they go out in search of food. There are no horses, no elephants, or other large mammals. Why become large and eatable when there are so many dangerous reptiles with huge fangs around? There are no whales in the sea. Parrots, hawks, and pigeons are nowhere to be seen. But pterodactyls 2.0 whiz past you constantly. Some are about the size of a helicopter, while others are no larger than a swan. There are plenty of primates, but they're in no hurry to climb down from their trees and walk on two legs. No venturing out into the savannah, no evolution into Homo sapiens. In this alternate reality, open spaces are very dangerous. But then again, so are forests and trees. Nowhere is safe. To get some delicious primate treats, many smaller dinosaurs learned to climb trees. This was already happening back in the Cretaceous period, right before that huge asteroid just missed Earth. Whew, that would have been an epic collision. Dinosaurs have grown wiser since that near miss. Some are even as smart as a modern chicken. A large brain uses a lot of energy, and that's not always a good strategy for survival. Safer to keep brains small and keep making those teeth bigger and pointier. You're on vacation, taking a trip to the family estate set in the cold Scottish Highlands. An old ruined castle sits alone, a token of your family's heritage. You spent your childhood in the nearby forest chasing squirrels, and through adulthood, you have enjoyed walking every acre of it. There's always something new to be found. As you walk the millionth time through the trees, you find a small stone building. It's half covered in dirt and overgrown grass. Curious, you've never seen this before. You dig away at the dirt and pull away the grass, eager to learn what's within. You find a small, weather-worn door, large enough for a dog. Maybe it's a royal doghouse. You pull the old door and look inside. It's a small room with nothing in it except for an old sack. You grab the sack, taking a closer look, trying to identify the fabric. But wait a minute, there's something inside of it. You look inside and find an egg about the size of an ostrich. Dogs don't lay eggs. Looking at the egg closely, you notice it's very old and heavier than you expected. You shake it gently, feeling the sensation of liquid inside. Suddenly, you feel some energy coming from it. Shocked, you attempt to throw the egg away, but stop yourself. For some reason, you feel a sense of longing towards the egg, as though it belongs to you. You hold it close, protecting it, and carry it back to the homestead. You sit by the egg, lying on the kitchen table, waiting and expecting something to happen. Your eyes become heavy, and slowly they close. Just as your eyelids touch, the egg wriggles slightly. You open your eyes in response, but the egg remains still. Did I imagine it? It wriggles again and again, and now it's constantly shaking. The egg rolls around on the table, cracks begin appearing, and something inside is hitting the shell with great ferocity, desperate to be released. Finally, the shell breaks open with an almighty thrust from the small resident. It stands with its arms stretched into the air and squeals out to the world,
"I am free!"
You look towards what should be a bird of some sort, but this is a very strange bird. 4 legs, wings, reptile skin. It's a dragon. Wait, what? A dragon?
Yes, a dragon.
It says to you after reading your thoughts. How? What? You're struggling to find your words.
You are the descendant of these holdings, are you not?
You nod, confused even more because it can speak.
As per the decree of 1061, we few that are laid within an egg are loyal to the caretaker side.
You look at one another. The dragon is definitely waiting for some response. You are so confused you can't utter a word.
Have you chosen a name for me to which I am to respond?
A name. Right, I will call you Dog. Dog responds by bowing honorably.
It is a worthy name I hope to bring glory to.
Glory? I don't understand why you're here, though. Why now? Dog explains that when elements of magic within the air react, it creates a perfect environment for dragon eggs to hatch. From a scientific perspective, changes within the Earth's atmosphere could probably explain all this. Whether it's the temperature, hydrogen levels, or changes in the ocean, it's impossible to determine. You accept that it's just magic. Exhausted by the events, you head to bed. The following morning, you awake, expecting to see Dog waiting for you. He's nowhere to be found. You go outside. It's all very quiet. No birds are singing. The distant sheep are also quiet. Suddenly, Dog flies down. He's grown to the size of a cow. He's grown way too fast, though you think you know why. You try not to imagine what he's been up to.
First lesson, human, get on.
Dog positions himself to allow you onto his back. You don't question him, trusting that he knows what he's doing. Without warning, he begins to run fast toward an open clearing, just like an airplane, as he gathers enough speed. With the force of the wind, you both take off. You speed through the air, gaining altitude. You hold on tight. Passing through near misses between trees, Dog makes immediate turns, and you wish you were safely on the ground. You can hear Dog's voice within your head.
You will act as my eyes as well, watching from where I cannot.
I see trees all around. There are some hills in the distance.
Not now.
Dog interrupts.
You will look out for danger, not observe the scenery.
You are flying for some hours, and you have no idea where you might be. You're too concerned about hanging on, and it's cold. You should have brought warmer clothes.
Now jump.
You jump without hesitation, trusting Dog's orders, but you quickly regret this move as you fall to the ground. The distant trees below are quickly becoming larger.
Spread your arms out and grab on.
Dog pulls in beneath. You land on top of him and grasp him immediately.
Good job. We only get one try at that trick.
Dog laughs. You safely land in a landscape you're unfamiliar with.
Fetch some wood. We'll make camp.
Annoyed at taking orders from what's meant to be your dragon, you respectfully go to collect wood as Dog flies away. You collect a good pile, all stacked neatly. Dog lands with a sudden thud next to it. He doesn't acknowledge your hard work and starts it up with one puff. He lays peacefully and drifts off to sleep, snoring loudly straight away. You enjoy the warmth, but it's still uncomfortable on the ground. You feel it would be appropriate to lay next to Dog, and he gives you a flick of his tail.
Oh, man.
With his eyes still closed, he grumbles,
I am not furniture. I am a dragon.
and goes back to sleep. You lay down elsewhere and drift off to sleep uncomfortably. As you wake up the next morning, there's hardly any warmth coming from the charcoal remains. Dog is nowhere to be found. Not surprised, you sigh, worst dragon ever. Dog arrives in his classic unexpected style and throws you some cooked meat. You don't ask where he got it. Best not to know.
Eat well. Today is our biggest task. Danger approaches.
Dog stands looking out towards the unknown. You eat your meal, enjoying the little something this partnership has provided. You look up and notice that Dog's size has grown twice as large overnight. You gather to his back and climb up. His wings are so large now he doesn't need a runway and takes flight without warning.
Be on the lookout today. Today is the day.
As Dog rushes forward, you ask, "What day?"
Just be focused.
Dog yells. Together, you fly north. The air is cooler, but Dog's body warmth is greater today. Dark clouds form in the distance. Flying closer, you can see things in the distance, unsure to make out what they are. Dog realizes your concern.
Ice goils.
What?
The same magic that allowed me to hatch brought them from the ice. They will want to turn the world frozen. Only we can stop them.
You're concerned as you observe their numbers. There might be dozens, if not hundreds, and possibly more hiding in the clouds behind them. As you approach, Dog speeds toward them, fending them off, breathing fire and biting. You hold on tight, trying to avoid the sharp ends of their wings. Their numbers are too many. Dog is becoming overwhelmed. An ice coil from overhead speeds down, targeting Dog, realizing he's unable to do anything as he's facing several of those at once. You leap towards it. You hit it in midair. It's like hitting a stone wall. You make no effect apart from distracting it. It flicks you away and you fall. Dog sees you, but he's unable to help, so he cries out to you. You fall helpless to the ground.
I've got you.
You can hear a girl's voice. She grabs you by the arm, pulling you onto another dragon. You smile and then turn around to see that there isn't just one, but dozens more, all flying to save Dog. The group of dragons targets the ice squirrels, rescuing Dog. Then they turn to defeat the remaining ice squirrels.
Something exciting and kinda unexpected popped out among the rocks of the Ica Valley in Peru. The bones of a really old whale that lived almost 40 million years ago. At first, no one was really impressed because the bones they found were big and weirdly shaped, so people just thought they were looking at giant boulders. I mean, that's cool too, but things got way better when they realized those were the remains of a very large, ancient animal that roamed along the coast of ancient Peru. Plus, it was probably the heaviest creature that ever lived. Sorry, blue whale, I know you worked hard to get to the top. The length of over 100 feet and weight of more than 200 tons brought you the status of the biggest animal on our planet. But it seems you've held the title long enough. Time to hand it over to our next candidate, and that one's really gigantic. This ocean beast was probably shorter than the blue whale, but heavier, with a weight that could be between 93 tons and 370 tons. If it's closer to the higher number, it'll make Prehistoric the biggest animal ever known to have lived on Earth. And it seems its weight was the result of having extremely thick, dense bones. You can see such bones today in manatees or some other early whales. Dense bones are a great tool for such marine mammals. This feature makes them heavy and allows them to stay submerged most of the time. But at the same time, if their body was too heavy, they would end up sinking all the time and they would waste too much energy to move back up to the surface. So, to avoid sinking, marine mammals need to have enough lighter tissues, like muscles and fat, to help them float in the water without using too much energy. Now, scientists didn't have the whole skeleton, which makes it hard to tell how big the animal was, but they used the ratio of the heavy bones to the lighter tissues in other marine mammals to estimate the overall weight of this giant ancient whale. Experts found these fossils about 13 years ago and spent the next decade freeing the whale from the rock. Its anatomy and age showed this whale was a cousin of Basilosaurus, a whale that had a long snout full of sharp teeth, and a sleek body similar to that of an eel. Even if Prehistoric wasn't bigger than the blue whale, it was still a giant that ruled the ocean depths. Unlike modern whales, there's a possibility that this ancient fellow was a predator that liked to go after bigger prey. And this also changes how we see the history of whales. Scientists used to think these magnificent creatures became really big about 5 million years ago when they started eating lots of small creatures. But here's the proof that giant whales existed even before that. But it's still unclear how this whale managed to find enough food to sustain its enormous body. Plus, it's still hard to tell what exactly this ancient creature had on its menu. It was pretty large and not such a fast swimmer, so it's possible it searched for food in shallow waters. Then it probably ate crustaceans, clams, or some other small animals hiding in the sand. One theory says it was a scavenger, which basically means it munched on remains of everything that would come its way. It's not so unusual to find marine animals in deserts. Many of these regions used to be covered with water anyway. The Sahara in Africa is a perfect example. About 50 to 100 million years ago, this was not a dry desert, but a shallow saltwater body called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. The land is not wet there anymore, of course, but people who lived in that area knew about it because they used to find old shells across the desert. The sea was about 164 feet deep. That sounds enough for a nice swim. Some would say this area looked like modern Puerto Rico, with lots of sun and shallow water. Mangrove forests were a common thing as well as seafloors covered with mollusks, like snails and clams. The marine sediment that was left behind after the sea had dried up is full of different fossils. And the animal that lived in that ancient underwater world didn't look friendly. Plus, they were much bigger than their relatives from modern times, so a regular-sized human would end up as a snack, not even a whole meal. Normally, when animals live on small islands, they can become much bigger than their relatives from the mainland. This is something we call island gigantism, and it happens because there are more resources or fewer predators on islands. Maybe the same thing happened in the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Even though it wasn't an actual island, the water moved in and out, which created little pockets of water. And specific conditions in these pockets might have helped animals grow bigger. So we're talking about giant sea snakes, catfish, and fish that no longer exist today. One had incredibly strong jaws, and the animal used them to eat hard things and even crush shells. Their teeth showed they were fierce predators other animals had every reason to be afraid of. They went through some changes when it came to diet, similar to some types of piranhas. And the competition to get to the top of the food chain wasn't a joke. Not when there were also such large predators as sharks, crocodiles, and ancient relatives of elephants. Sahara went through different phases. If you could use a time machine and take a peek at Earth's largest hot desert as it was about 6,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to struggle with sand and heat. You'd have a nice walk through a green and pretty lush place. In the past, people who lived in that area didn't leave drawings on cave walls that showed camels, sand dunes, and scorpions. All those things you'd see in today's Sahara. Instead, they drew crocodiles. That's additional evidence that the Sahara used to have a lot of water and plants enough to support these big yet scary animals. Around 3 billion years ago, Earth might have been mostly covered with water. Today, it's about 71% of its surface, but it seems that our planet used to be a giant ocean world with no continents at all, just some scattered islands. Scientists studied special rocks in Western Australia that formed in a place deep under the ocean called a hydrothermal vent system. To explain this better, it's important to mention two common oxygen types, O16 and O18. O18 is heavier because it has extra neutrons. O16 evaporates from water more easily, and as researchers studied an old ocean floor, they found a lot of O18, more than in today's oceans. This way, they realized ancient Earth had less dry land than Earth today. Australia is a good spot to conduct these studies because a long time ago, it also used to be a beautiful place with large animals and lush rainforests. But as time went by, the land became drier and Australia had more deserts formed, such as the Great Victoria Desert. Rainforest remained only on the edges of the continent. What happens with deserts across the globe is called desertification. That's when land that used to be good for growing things turns into a desert or something similar. Our planet changes over time, together with its climate. But desertification also happens because of human activities, like mining, farming, and building cities. And when land turns into a desert, it's a problem because it can't support people and animals anymore. Food doesn't grow there. There's not enough clean water, and animals lose their homes. To help with this problem, there's a plan many countries agreed to. They decided to work with farmers to take care of the land, fix damaged areas, and manage water better. All in all, to make our planet a better place for life.
This is going to be a very unusual match, but I bet it'll also be spectacular and intense. In the left corner, we have Megalodon. This species went extinct about 3 million years ago, but there are good reasons why it's now a legendary animal. It's the biggest shark that ever existed, and it was a super powerful predator in its time. And a round of applause for our contender in the right corner, Titanoboa. This one's way bigger than any other snake. It lives in the swamps of Colombia, and it's the real boss of the area. Titanoboa can eat absolutely any animal it decides to hunt, and it faces no competition. It can swallow a giant turtle or even a crocodile. It looks like a modern boa, but behaves like an anaconda, and that's a very scary mix. But can it stop a giant shark? Let's start by looking at their sizes. We still don't know about Megalodon's exact size, because the only remains of them that have survived are just fossilized backbones and teeth. But scientists generally think this monster was about 50 feet long. So it wasn't just the biggest shark that ever existed, but also one of the biggest fish of its time. Its closest rival is the modern whale shark, but they're only about 40 feet. The giant Titanoboa got so big thanks to a lucky coincidence. Snakes are cold-blooded animals, so they need a warm climate to live and grow in. Northeastern Colombia is perfect. It was about 90 degrees when Titanoboa was alive. This helped it grow to an incredible 42 feet in length. Titanoboa could easily swallow the longest snake registered in the Guinness Book of Records, which is only about 25 feet long. And that's a big gulp. So we have 50 feet versus 42. The first point goes to Megalodon. What about weight? Titanoboa is about 2,500 pounds. That's heavier than a small car, including the passengers. But it might be even heavier if you run into Titanoboa after it's had lunch. In that case, you can add a few hundred pounds more from the turtle or the alligator that it just swallowed. If you put Titanoboa on some very large scales, you'd need 5 giant anacondas on the other side to balance them out. But Megalodon is an incredible 50 times heavier than Titanoboa. The average adult female weighs between 27 and 59 tons. That's as much as an empty Boeing 737 airplane. And that's without carry-on luggage either. Luckily enough, Megalodon can't fly. So obviously, Megalodon wins in the weight category. That's one more point to the ancient shark. Although having such a large weight makes it difficult for the shark to move, and also means it's a little clumsy. Which leads us to our next category, speed and agility. Megalodon can swim at about 16 feet per second. That's enough to make it the ultimate predator, but it's still slower than plenty of other species. If Megalodon was swimming in a pool and Usain Bolt was running along next to it, he would be twice as fast. His top speed is almost 40 feet per second. Now, a sailfish, which is the fastest sea creature, can reach about 100 feet per second. Megalodon's size and weight make it turn really slowly, just the same as a large truck. So, when it attacks, the shark has only one chance to strike. If it misses, it has to go around for a second attempt. This gives its prey more than enough time to run away. Titanoboa isn't that fast either, especially on land. But when the giant snake is in the water, it can swim at a speed of up to 12 miles per hour. Not much, but enough for it to escape from Megalodon if it needs to. It's learned to swim so well because water is its main hunting ground. And because Titanoboa is a snake, duh, it also has incredible mobility. It can wriggle around and change direction very quickly, so it can easily dodge Megalodon's bite. So here's the first point for Titanoboa. The score is 2-1 in favor of Megalodon. Next section, fighting skills. Megalodon is incredibly smart. It can change tactics depending on what kind of prey it's hunting. Scientists have found teeth markings from Megalodon on some whale fossils. These show that the giant sharks aim their bites at their prey's vital body parts to take them out quickly. Other remains of Megalodon's victims have multiple fractures. This is because Megalodon performs a super powerful ram attack that can knock almost anything out. In fact, this 50-ton beast can easily smash through concrete walls. So, Megalodon's opponents don't really stand a chance. Some of them prefer to first damage the tails and fins of the whale they're hunting. This stops it from escaping, letting the huge predator finish off its defenseless victim. Now, what can Titanoboa do in response? The giant snake isn't poisonous, but this doesn't stop it from hunting prey up to 4 meters long. Its bite has a very special design. The structure of its teeth and jaws lets Titanoboa really clamp down on the body of its prey, so there's no escape. When hunting, Titanoboa uses similar tactics to an anaconda or a boa. By that, I mean it uses its powerful muscles and weight to stop its prey from moving. It deploys all of its strength to take away the animal's energy, making it helpless. So, Titanoboa is not only really speedy and agile, it can also fight its corner pretty well. It's definitely earned a point in the fighting skills section. The score is now 2-2. That's a tie going into the final round. We've got one more section before we find out which of these ancient monsters will win. Up now is fighting tools. Apart from its ramming power, Megalodon has something else up its sleeve, even though it really doesn't have arms or wears a coat. Let's take a look at its jaw. Its teeth are about 7 inches long. That's an absolute record for all known shark species in the world. Megalodon has about 250 of these deadly pointy things arranged in 5 rows. They're also really sharp, which helps it penetrate the thick skin of big animals like whales. Megalodon's jaws are 6.5 feet wide, and it has one of the strongest bites of any animal on the planet. Not only are they super dangerous, Megalodon's teeth are also really valuable. One of these ancient incisors was once found in Western Australia. The location where it was dug up was kept secret, but this didn't stop intruders from stealing it. It's probably in someone's private collection by now, and sadly, scientists missed the chance to learn something new about Megalodon. Titanoboa also has a mean set of teeth. They're thin and pointed like needles. They bend inwards in the snake's jaw like fishing hooks. This little feature helps Titanoboa get a grip on its prey and prevent the slightest chance of it running or swimming away. If the animal tries to pull itself free, it will only hurt itself even more. And remember that Titanoboa is incredibly agile, so it can strike with that bite at an incredible speed. Now, it's time for the fight itself. Titanoboa never swims in the open sea, but here Megalodon has gotten lost and ended up in a shallow swampy area off the coast of Colombia. In water like this, Megalodon finds it even harder to move around. It could bite Titanoboa just once and the fight would be over. But because the shark moves so much slower than the snake, for now he doesn't get the chance to snap those enormous jaws. Titanoboa starts attacking Megalodon, but it can't do much damage to that thick skin with its sharp but very short teeth. Eventually, Megalodon gets its chance and ends the fight with a single bite. It turns out that those huge teeth were what really mattered in this competition. Chew on that for a while. That's 3-2 and a victory to the giant shark. Psst, run! Really, it's not safe out there. There's a saber-toothed tiger lurking around. You better be careful. What are you doing? Don't peek. Okay, just one little peek. How's this possible, you ask? That's because you're in virtual reality, of course. These cool but very dangerous-looking big cats were alive during the last ice age. What if they decided to show up at your doorstep out of nowhere? Knock knock, a saber-toothed tiger is waiting for you to buy its cookies. Meanwhile, the coelacanth, this massive-looking fish, comes from a lineage that's been around for over 300 million years. We thought they didn't exist anymore until 1938, that is, when a live coelacanth was found again. Since then, they've been roaming the waters of the east coast of Africa and the waters of Sulawesi, Indonesia. Man, I wouldn't want to go for a swim and meet one of these fellas face to face. Their jaw has an intercranial joint, which means their mouth opens up by a lot. This is so they can eat large prey, like me. Not good. They're huge, too. Imagine a fish that's as long as you're tall and weighing as much as an average human. The takahe, a flightless bird, was thought to be gone in the year 1898. They're very cute, small and multicolored, usually not taller than your knee. But picture this. You're out for a hike in the Murchison Mountains. Looking around, you spot the bird you thought was extinct. But there they are, as happy as ever, surviving and chilling. Whole colonies of takahes was indeed found just 50 years after they were pronounced extinct. Good job, tiny little birds. A singing dog. Ever heard of those? Riley does sing sometimes when he's bored or hungry, but these are real performers. New Guinea singing dogs. They've been only recently discovered again in the wild for the first time in 50 years. Still, they were never completely extinct to begin with. New Guineans made sure they were safe next to them. But in the wild? very rare and hard to catch a sight of. Look, there goes one. The New Guinea singing dogs are called so because of their famous high-pitched singing. They sometimes sing together too, a dog choir of sorts where they all howl together. I bet they sing better than I do in the shower. Not going far from this area, we have bats, but these ones are sort of different. You see, their ears are enormous. I guess that's why they're called the New Guinea big-eared bats. Clever. The species was found again when one of them was accidentally caught in a bat trap. Until then, I guess they were playing hide-and-seek with us, because up till 1890, they had been thought to be gone. They're still not out of the danger zone because of habitat loss. Imagine you discover a fossil of a species you thought had been extinct for a long time, yet 2 years later, a whole living group of said species is found. Well, this is exactly what happened in 1977 with the Majorcan midwife toad. It's sort of brownish in color with darker brown that makes up its skin spots. Other than that, it's just a small toad with googly eyes. The group of live toads was found close to where the fossil was, on the island of Majorca. There aren't many of them left, about 500 in fact, and as of right now, they're declared vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Now, are you a fan of tortoises? You will be when you take a look at this huge beauty. It's called the Ferdinanda Island Galapagos tortoise. It hasn't been seen since 1906. But on February 17, 2019, we were finally able to look at one of these beautiful creatures. It's probably out there with a few of its mates right now, but they also don't allow themselves to be seen. We only know they exist because there's a few tracks and scents. With yet another frog, we have the horned marsupial frog. They're out and about in Ecuador, in the Chicxulub forest to be more specific. They're called this way because of their distinctive horns directly on top of their eyes. You know the pouch kangaroos use to carry their offspring? Well, the female horned marsupial frog also has that, except it's on the back, so it acts as sort of a backpack. They develop their embryos there, and when they're ready to come out, they hatch as complete infants, unlike regular frogs where they start out as tadpoles. One more toad, the starry night toad or harlequin toad. They're black and covered with loads of white spots all over them. Lost for 30 years, it was discovered back in 2019. Picture them as big bodyguards, water bodyguards to be exact. Oh, that's a very big toad on your screen. Well, for the Arhuaco people, that's exactly what they are, guardians of water. They also have their own name for them, Guna. Sounds like a cheese. When scientists found them yet again, they came across 30 of these little creatures, but initially, they were expecting only one. Well, what a nice surprise. Here's a tiger for you, although it doesn't quite look like your typical tiger. It's called the Tasmanian tiger, and it seemingly disappeared since 1936. But then, out of nowhere, people started seeing them out there in the wild just 5 years ago in 2016. They sort of resemble dogs more than tigers, or a fox maybe. Just take a look at its muzzle. Maybe even a mix of both. Then, a few others started popping up too. And if you happen to think you're seeing one right in front of you, but you're not quite sure, check if they've got stripes on their back. They're definitely out there, but still technically marked as extinct by the IUCN. Okay, picture a horse that looks straight out of a movie scene. Tiny, gorgeous fur, very well behaved. It's tiny, but it's not a pony. It's a Caspian horse. They have an interesting backstory to them. They were discovered by Louise Leyland, who got married to an aristocrat in 1957. Having moved to Tehran, Iran, she didn't quite like how the horses behaved there, so she took matters into her own hands. She took a few people with her, and off they went to the Caspian Sea mountain. And in there, they found 3 of these beautiful tiny little horses. Well, that's how the story goes. Coming up next, a possum that was found in an unexpected place. Guess where? You have 3 options to pick from: hiding in a ski resort, in the Australian outback, or in someone's apartment in the bathroom? Which one do you choose? You have 3 seconds. The right answer is a ski resort. Yes, this possum is called the mountain pygmy possum, and it's originating from Australia. So far, there are 3 different living populations of this tiny possum, but it was believed to be extinct until just 1966. There are fewer than 100 of them, so the IUCN has marked them as critically endangered. Also from Australia is the night parrot, an absolute delight to birdwatchers. Very beautiful, yet mysterious. These little fellas live in very remote areas. You can probably count on the fingers of your hand how many times these birds have been seen since they were found again in 1979. That's how rare they are. Have you ever seen a pygmy tarsier? Neither have I. It was only in 2008 that 3 of them were caught. Scientists don't really want to lose track of their movements again, so what they did was gift them with tiny little collars. This way they can live their life as happy as ever and will know they're safe. The last one I want to tell you about is the tree lobster, but as the name might mistakenly tell you, they're not really lobsters. They're just big black bugs with huge legs. Their extinction story is a sad one. In 1920, a cargo ship got stuck on Lord Howe Island, and it had rats aboard. These rats fled the ship and ran straight to land. Even though tree lobsters are bigger than most insects, they're still relatively small compared to rats. The poor things never stood a chance. Still, in 2004, life shone again for these distinct critters. A pair of Australian scientists were out and about on the island and came across 24 of them. All of them were living beneath one single shrub. Hey, if there's enough space for everyone, it's not small, it's cozy. Bottom line, it's better to be distinct than extinct. Don't you agree?
What's the scariest predator under the ocean? The crocodile? Huh, I don't think so. Loch Ness Monster? Please, it never existed. How about the Kronosaurus? Well, it is extinct, but you might be onto something. Let's take a look at what it'd be like if these creatures were still around today. First things first, what on earth was it? The Kronosaurus was a marine carnivore that lived in the cool, high-latitude Eromanga Sea. It covered vast areas of inland Australia between 90 and 120 million years ago, during the early Cretaceous period. Near-complete fossils of the creature were also found near Colombia, which is a country that has a noted connection to prehistoric reptiles and turtles. This fact makes it extremely possible that the monster I'm about to describe existed worldwide. You might have heard saurus and thought, oh, it's a dinosaur. But these were actually reptiles. They were the largest member of the Plesiosauridae family, referred to as plesiosaurs. Fossil evidence suggests they weighed over 20,000 pounds and were roughly 30 feet in length. Just to put that in perspective, the longest crocodile ever measured was a saltwater crocodile by the name of Lolong from the Philippines. It was 20 feet in length and weighed just under 2,500 pounds. And that's still 10 feet shorter and incredibly lighter than the average Kronosaurus, making the crocodile seem like nothing more than a glorified goldfish in comparison. Despite its terrifying length, the most physically daunting feature of the Kronosaurus was its head. Its skull was about 8 feet long, which was actually proportionally large given the size of its body length. Anything that was unfortunate enough to end up inside the Kronosaurus's mouth may have been given false hope. After all, the teeth of the beast weren't actually that sharp. On second thought, I take that back. I wouldn't feel confident around a toothless snake, let alone being inside the mouth of this monster. But it's true that the Kronosaurus's teeth weren't sharp, especially when compared to other carnivorous reptiles, such as crocodiles and alligators. The teeth of this prehistoric sea creature were instead conical. This means that they were cone-like in shape. Unfortunately, this lack of sharpness didn't make them less dangerous. The teeth were enormous and could be up to 12 inches long from the crown tips to the bottom of the roots. This obviously meant that the Kronosaurus had an extremely powerful bite. It was estimated to be up to 30,000 newtons, which is almost twice as powerful as the bite of a large saltwater crocodile. Because of the bluntness of their teeth, they weren't suited for twisting their prey once in their grasp, but the size and shape of the teeth made them perfect for simple open and shut biting. They would have had no problem crushing hard objects such as the toughest of shells any sea turtle could offer. Just like crocodiles, the Kronosaurus is believed to have had a short neck. This may have been an adaptation to allow the beast to successfully catch small, evasive animals. Their body, in general, was fusiform and streamlined. This means it was narrowed at both ends and had very little resistance to the flow of water. The Kronosaurus was also equipped with 4 paddle-like limbs. The hind limbs were larger than the front ones. They could span approximately 7 feet in diameter. All in all, this set the Kronosaurus up to effortlessly propel itself through the waters and be an ultimate predator. Predator X, if you will? That's the name that was given to the fossil of a creature discovered near Svalbard, a Norwegian island group, in 2009. The fossil was identified as a 50-foot-long, 100,000-pound monster with a bite force of 33,000 pounds per square inch. This might be the highest bite force of any known animal. Although Predator X is yet to be classified as any specific type of animal, it was definitely a plesiosaur like the Kronosaurus. And even if it wasn't Predator X, the Kronosaurus was still most definitely a ferocious titan when it roamed Earth's oceans. The Kronosaurus actually got its name from the Greek mythological figure of Kronos, the father of Zeus. Kronos was viewed as a titan from a generation of super powerful beings. So what was it that the Kronosaurus, this terrifying monster, actually feasted on to satisfy its appetite? This creature was known to eat sea turtles, squid, and other larger marine reptiles of that time, such as elasmosaurids and ichthyosaurs. This suggests that if crocodiles existed in the realms of the Kronosaurus, they too might have turned into lunch for the beast. There's evidence from the fossil remains of the Kronosaurus that suggests that they also feasted on sharks, which I know is a disappointment to those of you who view that beast as the king of the ocean. Not when the Kronosaurus was around, my friend. In any case, grounding all kinds of food into small pieces to help digest them would have been difficult without small teeth. This explains the presence of rounded stones found in many of the remains of these sea creatures. Researchers believe these stones may have been swallowed to control buoyancy or to help process food. It's also entirely possible they were accidentally swallowed while feeding on other animals from the seafloor. As if the Kronosaurus even needed to be a meanie with its already existing power and size, there's also evidence to suggest that it indeed might have been. It turns out that after using all its impressive attributes to catch its dinner, the Kronosaurus first liked to play with its food, like a cat does with a mouse. I guess since the hunt was so easy for them, they needed to get their fun from somewhere else. Well, I think now you should have a good idea about these creatures. So let's ask ourselves what it would be like if they were still around today. And by the way, why aren't they? Well, the Kronosaurus was completely finished off by the same KT meteor that took out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But even before this catastrophic event, they were coming under increased pressure from an even bigger and more vicious family of carnivorous marine reptiles known as mosasaurs. You can't always be a top dog, I guess, or rather, top marine reptile. But what if this never happened, and they were still roaming Earth? Well, this might be obvious, but can you imagine what kind of impact that would have on sea tourism? Based on the impact that famous movies about sharks and killer whales had, what do you think the presence of a Kronosaurus in the ocean would do to beaches? The very creature that would eat sharks and whales for breakfast. Beaches would certainly become a great place to go for a quiet walk, because nobody else would even be there. And what about such activities as boating, surfing, and scuba diving? You think anyone would dare try them, knowing that this 30-foot beast could be lurking beneath them? Let's give humans some credit and assume most of them wouldn't. This would cripple the global sea tourism industry. which is responsible for earning roughly $143 billion every year. Just to make sure this shocking point hits home, the most expensive yacht to ever roam the ocean was called the History Supreme. Its master bedroom was believed to have a statue made of T-Rex's bone and a wall made of meteorite rocks, as well as a 24-karat gold panoramic wall aquarium. Anyway, this yacht was worth nearly $5 billion, meaning you could buy 38 of them with the money lost in potential damages to sea tourism caused by the Kronosaurus. I'm sure that the yacht's owner was happy the beast never made an appearance in their luxurious aquarium. So luxurious, in fact, that some people believe the History Supreme, reportedly owned by some business genius from Malaysia, never even existed. Rumor has it that it was simply an elaborate hoax fabricated by the supposed designer. Anyway, I don't think the trouble would just stop there. People could actually be in serious danger, regardless of being near the ocean or not. No, I'm not about to tell you that this thing would grow legs, adapt to living on land, and start picking us off one by one. At least, I hope not. I'm just going to point out the damage that the Kronosaurus would inflict through its devastating impact on sea trade. In America, ocean transit accounts for 76% of national trade. On top of this, more than 100 vital pharmaceutical products originate in the sea. I'll also state the obvious and point out that the ocean is a huge food source for us humans. The presence of the Kronosaurus could have a great impact on our relationship with the ocean, something we usually take for granted.
Australia used to have its own giants. Those were huge animals that could have dwarfed anything living on this continent these days. Scientists found the remains of many of those ancient creatures in the Narracuta Caves in South Australia, 4 hours away from Adelaide. It's a lovely region, but it can be treacherous. Watch out for holes the ground is pocked with. Known as pitfall traps, many of them are no wider than a coffee table. They're deep and plunge into the darkest of caverns. One of such caverns is called Victoria Fossil Cave, and it's a treasury that's been hiding the bones of around 45,000 animals for centuries. Some of the oldest bones belong to creatures far more terrifying than any animal you can encounter today. Those were the ancient Australian megafauna, huge beasts that roamed the continent during the Pleistocene epoch. During those, there were giant snakes, huge flightless birds, wombat-like creatures the size of a rhinoceros, and many others. One of the largest examples of the Australian megafauna scientists have discovered so far is the Diprotodon. That giant herbivorous creature was 10 feet long and 6.5 feet tall, and weighed more than 6,000 pounds, about as much as a small Asian elephant. Even though this terrifying beast didn't eat meat, it could have smashed other animals with its sheer weight. Scientists have found the remains of hundreds of such creatures all over Australia, so it's safe to say that no other animal from that time or in that location was larger than this giant. Despite its creepy appearance, the Diprotodon was a relative to the modern-day wombat, and those are known to sometimes pounce humans. The Diprotodon had toes that pointed inward and were well suited for digging burrows. On the other hand, Diprotodon was a giant, and it was unlikely that it used to do so. It was likely a trait it had inherited from its smaller burrowing ancestors, or it could have used its claws to search for roots. This theory is supported by the fact that the animal's pouch was facing backward. It prevented any dirt from collecting inside while the creature was digging. Since this animal was so big, it didn't have to worry much about predators. Up until 60,000 years ago, when the first humans appeared on the continent, full-grown Diprotodons only had to look out for creatures like the Quincana. Measuring in at a whopping 20 feet long, the Quincana was a land crocodile. It lived in Australia from around 20 million to 40,000 years ago. It disappeared along with most other mega creatures of the last ice age. It's thought to be the result of the first humans coming to the continent. Even though the Quincana was extremely fast and dangerous, it was possible that this creature got out-competed by human hunters who took all available prey. Unlike modern crocodiles that are mainly aquatic, that mighty beast was a land dweller. Scientists figured it out by studying the Quincana's legs. They were able to support and carry the body clear off the ground. It means there was no escape for ancient people once the Quincana spotted them. Modern crocodiles can only push themselves along on their bellies. Such an adaptation allowed the quincana to chase its prey for long periods of time, exhausting it in the process. Another creepy feature of this ancient monster was its teeth. Aquatic crocs have conical teeth. Those are great for gripping and holding on to prey underwater. But quincana had knife-like teeth, ideal for slicing soft-bodied animals like, mammals. Another Australian monster, Thylacoleo, wasn't all that large, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. It was still among the top predators and the biggest carnivorous animals in Australia. This creature was a true oddity of nature, even by prehistoric standards. First, its teeth resembled not those of a regular predator, but those of a rodent. Its front incisors were enlarged, taking the place of canines. Premolars were also shaped like blades. They were used for cutting flesh and bone. At first, scientists thought that Thylacoleo used those teeth to eat nuts and fruits. But later, a study showed that the use of such teeth was better suited on necks and spines. The jaws of this ancient creature were immensely powerful. A 220-pound Thylacoleo had a bite force similar to that of a present-day 550-pound lion. It means that the animal could easily bring down prey much larger than itself. Then there was Thylacoleo's tail. It had strong muscles which provided the animal with the ability to use the tail as support when tackling large prey. The Thylacoleo had retractable claws, and this feature is very uncommon among marsupials. It allowed the animal to keep its razor-sharp hooks from getting blunt and could help it get a better grip on its prey. Scientists are quite sure that, like today's leopards, the Thylacoleo could climb trees and jump on other animals from above. It was done so fast and stealthily, they never knew what hit them. The creature's rear feet support this theory. The first toe there was reduced, but the foot had a rough pad like what modern-day possums have. It allowed them to have a better grip while climbing. Right after scientists found the first skull of the Megalodon, this animal was classified as a lizard. That's why its name translates to small groomer. But after they discovered more complete fossils, it turned out that the Megalodon was a giant turtle. But that's not all. It was one of the largest land turtles to ever have existed. The main reason researchers initially believed the creature to be a lizard was the fact that its skull was adorned with a series of spikes. It's something the modern-day horned lizard can boast. But even after discovering the true nature of the Megalodon, scientists still don't know how to properly catalog it. It might have been a creature that folded its neck under its spine, or it could have folded it to the side. Beside those defensive mechanisms on its head, the Megalodon was also equipped with a spiked tail, which was probably used to prevent predators from attacking the animal from behind. Most species of the Megalodon disappeared around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago because of humans who hunted them to extinction in both Australia and on the surrounding islands. It took around 2 centuries for these turtles to go extinct in that region of the globe. The Megalodon was a giant Australian lizard that existed at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. It looked like a Komodo dragon and the Australian monitor lizard, which are both believed to be Megalodon's closest living relatives. Fossils tell us that the ancient animal was anywhere from 15 to 26 feet in length. Ow! The youngest fossil remains of this ancient Australian monitor lizard date back to about 50,000 years ago. The first indigenous settlers must have encountered Megalodon, which led to the lizard's extinction. Originally, scientists thought that the Megalodon was the only member of the genus Megalodon, but these days it belongs to the genus Varanus, which means that the prehistoric creature is closely related to other Australian monitor lizards. Our next giant creature on our list was once dubbed an ostrich on steroids. I mean, look at it. It was the last of the thunderbirds to go extinct in Australia. The Genurus lived on the continent at the same time as early humans. They might have coexisted for 15,000 years or so before the huge bird eventually disappeared. This theory has some proof. The bird's fossils found along with human artifacts. Some cave paintings also depict flightless birds similar to the Genurus in size and shape. Although it wasn't the largest bird in Australia, the goose-like creature was still as tall as a grown-up man and weighed around 550 pounds. Even a modern-day ostrich can be dangerous if it feels threatened. Imagine meeting its giant prehistoric relative. Scientists are still arguing about its diet. Many believe the creature was an herbivore, but there's still a chance that the Genyornis was a partial scavenger. Its small, stubby wings and powerful hoof-like legs hint that the bird could have been a plant eater. But its huge beak and exceptionally deep lower jaw evoke suspicion. Such features are highly unusual in birds. If dinosaurs once ruled the Earth, it seems like we should stumble upon their bones everywhere. But we don't. Why is that? Aren't you curious? There's no conspiracy here. The truth is that the quest to find dino remains is much more complex than meets the eye. Yes, dinosaur bones are real, we found tons of them, and they've already been uncovered on every continent, despite many people arguing otherwise. And the uneven distribution of these prehistoric treasures is simply a quirk of nature. Turns out fossilization is an incredibly rare phenomenon. It only happens under specific conditions. When a dino bites the dust, the journey to fossilization begins. The carcass needs swift burial by sediment, followed by layers upon layers, creating a geological pressure cooker. Minerals sneak into the bones, morphing them into stone. This unique recipe predominantly occurs underwater, where sediments like sand and mud can gracefully cloak the fallen giants. Which is why dinos meeting their end above ground rarely end up as fossils. For example, we barely find any fossils of species who lived in the jungle, and especially in the mountains. Researchers reveal that many fossils arise from areas near lakes or rivers. Whether drowned before a flood or carried away by rain, these dinosaurs lucked out in fossil formation. These are the reasons why we don't discover dinos in every nook and cranny. The harsh reality is that we might never meet many dino species, all because of these limitations of fossilization. Around 71% of dinosaurs will never be discovered. We don't even know how many species we've lost due to unsuitable conditions. If we're super lucky, we might find some fossils of mountain dinosaurs in local rivers, but that's a very rare case. So yes, while dinosaurs graced the globe, all the fossils we found so far were due to great luck. Now, this makes you wonder how much dinosaurs lived in general. There are myths about them leading a tortoise-paced life. People believe that dinos were sauntering through centuries to achieve colossal sizes. Funny enough, the truth is exactly opposite. In reality, dinosaurs lived shortly and shone bright like rock stars. Unfortunately, once these animals hit the prime of reproduction, they often found themselves on the fast track to fossilization before reaching their full-size potential. What's interesting is that dinosaur life cycles align with the rhythm of trees. Perhaps you know that it's possible to determine how old the tree lived by its rings. It's true, each pair of light and dark rings equals 1 year of age. Like the rings tell us about trees, dinos' bones tell us about them. Researchers examine slices of bones under a microscope, analyzing different tissues to gauge growth rates. Thick rings mean rapid growth, and narrow ones mean a more leisurely pace. In the animal kingdom, bigger usually equals longer life. So, some people wonder whether big dinos actually live longer. Apparently so. Large sauropod dinosaurs, akin to ancient behemoths, likely took around 30 to 35 years to reach their colossal peak. Following that, they might have enjoyed a few more decades on the prehistoric stage. For smaller dinosaurs, like the nimble arthropods, life was a swift affair. They grew to their full size after around 4 to 5 years of life. But after a mere 3 to 4 years, these mini dinos, unless super fortunate, might have bid adieu. So it turns out many dinosaurs didn't live for hundreds of years. Most of them, even colossal ones, rarely marked even their 50s. It's a surprise if you compare them to today's giants like blue whales and elephants. These animals boast human life-like spans. Blue whales live for around 80 to 90 years, and many elephants make it to their 60s to 70s. And they're not as big as some dinosaurs. Yeah, it's a pity that they left our planet so early, and we don't have a chance to study so many of them. What's even sadder is that dinosaurs have been doomed from the beginning. Even if a random cosmic rock hadn't hit our planet, dinosaurs would still have gone extinct by today. The Chicxulub meteorite smashed into our planet 66 million years ago. For the record, it didn't actually destroy all the dinosaurs, only the non-avian ones. The rest became birds. Yep, some of these colossal creatures became tiny chickens and pigeons we see today. Guess they know what wolves might feel like. But even before that happened, the Earth was slowly preparing a catastrophe for them. Recent research shows that the era before the asteroid impact wasn't exactly a paradise. It was more like a brewing cauldron of environmental challenges. The scientists delved into the Deccan Traps, one of the largest volcanic regions in present-day West India. They came up with an innovative technique to study the past through volcanoes by measuring sulfur concentrations in rocks. That's how they learned that the Deccan Traps, spewing millions of cubic miles of molten rock, contributed to global climate shifts. Over 100,000 years before the infamous Chicxulub meteor struck, global temperatures might have plummeted by several degrees. This sudden drop was most likely triggered by sulfur emissions from the Deccan Traps. And this, in turn, led to pretty wild, unpleasant climate conditions. The Earth ended up experiencing volcanic winters. This made life super challenging for flora and fauna and set the stage for the eventual dinosaur extinction. So, even if there was no asteroid, dinos wouldn't survive for too long. For a long time, scientists have been arguing whether it was the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs or the volcanic activity. Finally, technology is developing, and we can use it to answer this question. An AI system developed by researchers offers its own perspective. Using over 100 processors fed with geological and climatic data, the AI explored the fossil records and over 300,000 possible scenarios to find the truth. And, according to the machine, the volcanic theory is far more plausible. It told the scientists that the climate changes required for a mass extinction were likely caused by the Deccan Traps alone, even without the asteroid impact. The volcanic eruptions coincided with the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, starting 300,000 years before the asteroid, and it continued for an extended period. This raised some questions about human versus AI judgment. Some scientists expressed skepticism and talked about the AI's potential bias. But the researchers who led the project are excited about the novelty of their method and its potential to explore other periods of Earth history. However, it will likely take some time for humans to build trust in AI. We already mentioned that non-avian dinosaurs survived this apocalyptic event. For some reason, neither volcanoes nor an asteroid wiped out everything on our planet. Many animals survived, evolving into mammals, and many plants continued to flourish. Plants went through this even better than animals, actually. A catastrophe bid farewell to about 75% of Earth's species, not to count all the individual losses. Yet, botanical wonders survived. Around 78% of our plant species owe their existence to their persistent ancestors. Unfortunately, plants don't turn into fossils as easily as animals do, and we already know that this process isn't quick or common either. So the researchers had to turn to evolutionary trees. They analyzed up to 73,000 surviving plant species. The findings revealed a remarkable narrative of evolution and dominance. Turns out, after the Great Extinction, these sneaky plants seized the opportunity, just like mammals who rose to prominence after the dinosaur era. Major orders, like those of mint, magnolia, and orchids, not only coexisted with dinosaurs, but thrived beyond the extinction. The secret to their success lies in how they could adapt for pollination. They didn't care whether they were pollinated by wind or insects or anything else, basically eating resources from anywhere they could find. Thanks to this awesome adaptability, which scientists call flower power, their legacy lives and flourishes today. Now here's something. Baltic amber is one of the most common resins found in the world. The reason for this is that due to the vast forests of pine, their numerous deposits are so common, they provide wonderful treasures from long ago. Ants are especially common in the Baltic amber, which comes from pine trees. Its resin is rich in sugar, so the ants often live amongst the trees, close to the easy source of food. One block found in East Germany has preserved one ant that is estimated to be about 48 million years old. Think of the birthday cake. But what makes this find interesting is another animal inside the amber. It's a mite, notorious hunters in the insect world, capable of traveling at great speed. These guys quickly latch onto their hosts, sucking them dry. They're also capable of destroying entire hives in one go. And within this piece of amber, the amber provides a display of their final struggle. In Southeast Asia, feathers belonging to something unique have been found from 80 million years ago. They were captured in resin during the Cretaceous period, a peak time for dinosaurs. The many feathers inside are from the Coelurosaur. It looks like a dinosaur, but this animal is more related to birds. Other feathers like this have been found in resin. They belong to avian and other non-flying dinosaurs. The discoveries have helped reimagine what dinosaurs actually look like. Still, dinosaurs may have had feathers instead of being completely bald. Of course, for most of them, the feathers weren't used for flying, but they helped the dinos stay warm. However, the feathers weren't all that was found, and a part of the Coelurosaur's tail is also preserved. Still, it's so small and ancient that its DNA hasn't survived to map their entire genome. The enclosed tail is also very delicate, and it can't be removed from its protective amber shell. But although these findings can only be observed, they've still provided a great insight in the evolution of birds. But how does amber preserve things so effectively, even at the initial stages? The trees produce the resin to protect any small gaps in the bark against feeding insects. Its antiseptic nature and lack of water content ensures it doesn't degrade for a long time. This also makes it more resilient as it petrifies over long periods, eventually becoming a fossil. Some of the oldest amber ever found was from the Triassic period, showing how long it can last. The pieces from Italy are about 230 million years old. And inside one of these ancient droplets holds the oldest arthropod ever recorded. This mite found inside has provided a broader understanding to their evolution. Today, they're known to mainly annoy gardeners by feeding on the petals of flowering plants. However, at the time the mite was caught, flowers didn't have any petals, and it would be without this tasty meal for another 100 million years. Now, 100 million years ago, Myanmar was part of Gondwana, the great supercontinent. At that time, Myanmar wasn't part of Asia yet. But it was still lush with a great forest, which contained many species of lizards that lived amongst the undergrowth, hiding away from dinosaurs. Many of them have been stored within amber. This fact helped discover ancestors of geckos and chameleons. By using CT scans, scientists have analyzed them, providing a glimpse into the formation of their scales, teeth, feet, and claws. It also provided an understanding of how these archaic creatures once appeared. Although mostly pieces of lizards, by using modern technology, the scientists have been able to create 3D images of the lizard. These images can reveal how those guys appeared in their full form. The images show that they still retain some of their exact features to this day, like the chameleon's sticky pads used for climbing. A salamander fossil from around 20 million years ago is one of the most intact specimens ever found in amber. Details of its final moments show that it had been attacked before getting stuck in the resin. However, what's confusing about this find from the Miocene era is that the amber was found in the Caribbean, but it came from a tree that's closer related to those from East Africa. The lizard also has ancestry from the same area. Finds like this have opened a whole new understanding about how these small lizards migrated. It's expected that they would have ridden fallen logs, which took them across the seas to new homelands, not only to the Caribbean, but to all continents except for Antarctica. Nobody goes there, it's too cold. In the Dominican Republic, you can find some of the rarest of all ambers. This Dominican amber came from neotropical forests from around 20 million years ago. Many of the trees that made the resin are now extinct. The amber is almost completely see-through and can come in an array of beautiful colors. The most common colors are red, yellow, and even blue, and are easily mistaken for gemstones. One was found with a flea caught in it, dating to when the forest was at its peak and the mammalian variety thrived. Fleas were likely common at the time, and this flea in particular had recently fed on a mammal before getting stuck. However, something more intriguing was found within the flea. While scientists checked what mammal DNA was within the flea, they found that it was carrying an ancient bacterial blight. These blights have been constant throughout Earth's history, dramatically decreasing populations of animals and plants. This now extinct blight in the amber helped scientists determine how much the bacteria have evolved and how it spread. Now, most remnants of insects inside amber aren't much more than the exoskeleton bodies. But with some found in Myanmar, they were so well preserved that even the color of the insects is still intact. Colors in nature appear in three different ways. The first is bioluminescence, that's produced by a chemical reaction within a living organism. The second is about pigments, where the color appears in an animal or plant tissue. The third is called structural coloration, and the production of colors here is explained by microscopic surfaces fine enough to react with the light. The rare insects in amber were found in the form of structural coloration, but only at specific wavelengths. It all explains the very intense colors rarely found. 99 million years later, these bugs can still show their vibrant colors – blue, purple, and green. Some of them appear so different in color and shape that they almost look like they're from another world. Which of course they are, a very old one. Ants have been around for about 168 million years, based on fossil evidence provided. They're well known for their social hierarchies and their hive mind system. They've dominated almost every corner of the insect world, but when these social capabilities came about have been difficult to determine. Yet, recently, amber dated from 100 million years ago has shed some light into their evolution. Several amber pieces have preserved various ant types, including the worker ants, guardian or soldier ants, and even a queen ant. Before these pieces were found, it was estimated their social nature occurred millions of years later. A piece of amber, dated 100 million years ago, helped shed light on the evolution of birds. A perfectly preserved bird that hatched preserved in amber was already equipped with its flight feathers. With the earlier physical abilities, they would be capable of moving around the nest by themselves at a very young age, and it's expected they could search for their own food almost immediately. But as birds continue to evolve and spend more time in the skies, their brain developed larger for their cognitive abilities. After hatching, their early development was then more focused on the brain, and the chicks slowly became more reliant on their parents over time. In Spain, a massive treasure trove of amber and other fossils has been found. Inside, there were remnants of an entire ecosystem that existed 110 million years ago. A bunch of individual fossils were found. The vast collection includes many types of insects, mollusks, arachnids, plants, 50 different dinosaur bone fragments, feathers, and hair from mammals, and a McDonald's burger wrapper. Nah, just kidding. With the abundance of findings, it's helped researchers understand the ancient terrestrial ecosystem that once existed. With loads of specific details of the environment, they've reconstructed the swamp. This way, it's now possible to experience what it was like in the world of dinosaurs. Scientists have finally solved the Loch Ness Monster mystery. Here's the spoiler, you ready? It's not a real monster. It's probably a dinosaur that survived through the ages, or just a bunch of debris floating on the water. Thanks to many findings on the Loch Ness creature, we have proof of another story to tell you. It was 1933 when a man named George Spicer and his wife were driving along the shores of Loch Ness. That's when they saw something massive with a long neck moving across the road. It looked like a creature straight out of the prehistoric era, a dinosaur-like beast unlike anything they'd ever seen. That was the moment that Loch Ness Monster theories started spreading around like wildfire. One of the most famous Loch Ness Monster sightings came just a year later, in 1934, when a man took a photograph that became the most well-known image of Nessie. That's the nickname she was given. She? Anyways, the photo, known as the surgeon's photograph, showed a long-necked creature rising out of the water, and for years it convinced people that the monster was real. But years later, the truth came out. One of the men who helped take the photo confessed it was all a hoax. The photo had been staged after all. When the photo was published, it had been significantly cropped. This made the animal in the picture look much bigger than in real life, fueling the theories that the Loch Ness Monster did in fact exist. In the 1960s, one of the first big scientific attempts to investigate the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster happened. A research team took sonar equipment to the lake and spent hours scanning the waters in search of evidence of large creatures. What they found was puzzling. They recorded several objects moving deep in the loch, or lake, with no clear explanation as to what it was. Though the team didn't manage to capture anything definitive, this sighting helped fuel the belief that there was indeed something massive living in Loch Ness. After that, research about the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster kept popping up. In 1972, with the help of underwater photography, some researchers managed to capture strange images, which got people's hopes up for a minute. But the truth is, this early research about the Loch Ness Monster was far from conclusive. Now, of course, not everyone bought into the mystical, magical theories about the Loch Ness Monster. Theory 1, from a professor of zoology at Oxford University, has made it clear that the monster is a biological impossibility. Hey, my pediatrician said that about me, too. Meanwhile, he says that no skeletal remains have ever been found in the region. Plus, no fishermen have ever caught anything resembling the creature in their fishing nets. For him, this works as proof that it simply can't be real. When it comes to the famous photos of the Loch Ness Monster as evidence, well, that's pretty simple. The professor offers a more down-to-earth explanation. He argues that these images are either showing floating debris or birds, like cormorants, which have long necks and often appear to be low in the water. When people refute his suggestion, he takes us back to human psychology and explains that people often make mistakes and misjudge the size of things, especially when they just caught a glimpse of it, and even more so when they are hoping to see something specific. Now, many of those alleged photos depict an animal with a long neck and a small head, which has led some to believe that what they're seeing is a plesiosaur, a giant marine reptile that lived 215 million years ago and disappeared with the dinosaurs. The idea of a plesiosaur surviving all these years is a theory that's been around since the first sightings of the creature. But this researcher isn't buying it. He explains that no plesiosaur fossils have been found in the region dating to anything later than 66 million years ago. The idea of a prehistoric creature still lurking in the waters of Loch Ness just doesn't hold up scientifically. Then there's theory number 2, from a British naturalist who has spent over 50 years investigating the Loch Ness Monster phenomenon. His conclusion is a little less dramatic. He believes that most people who report sightings of long-necked creatures are misidentifying other animals. He suggests people think they are seeing a sea serpent. Reports of sightings from the Loch Ness Monster have been around since the 6th century CE, long before they were distilling Scotch whiskey or other explanations. Early reports of these sea serpents describe large creatures with long snake-like bodies and multiple humps. Some say the creatures were as big as boats, and many swore they saw something swimming in the waters. Many of these early sea serpent sightings may have been misunderstandings or exaggerations of normal animals in the loch, like large fish or even swimming birds. They could have been large eels, which are known to live in Loch Ness. These eels, especially when they're moving, might have given the impression of a long, undulating creature in the water. People who saw these eels from a distance, particularly in low light or misty conditions, might have mistaken them for something much more mysterious. Theory number 3 says something else. Nessie is just a series of standing waves. These happen when two boat wakes move in opposite directions, creating a big hump in the water that could look like a creature from a distance. Loch Ness enthusiasts even showed how it works, with footage from Fort Augustus, where a river meets Loch Ness. These enthusiasts had big plans to use drones with infrared cameras and special underwater microphones to search the loch. Now, Loch Ness is massive, stretching around 23 miles long and more than 700 feet deep. So, they thought they needed drones and infrared cameras to put an end to this discussion. But despite everything, they haven't found Nessie. But it's not only the Loch Ness Monster that lacks scientific explanation. There have also been scores of sightings of Yetis and Sasquatches that no one can really explain. Folks have made movies, dreaming of finding the truth about these creatures. But, according to recent research and evidence, it looks unlikely that we'll ever find definitive evidence of their existence. Science says they can explain Sasquatch sightings, and this is how. Biologists who study wildlife using camera traps, which are set up in remote areas to capture images of passing animals, have long attempted to find elusive species. These cameras detect movement and snap pictures, providing invaluable data on the biodiversity of different ecosystems. As camera traps collect more photos over time, the number of species recorded grows. However, after a while, the number plateaus, suggesting that no new species are being detected. While it's impossible to claim 100% certainty, researchers say that after significant camera deployment, it's safe to say the likelihood of discovering new species, especially large ones like Bigfoot or the Yeti, drops significantly. Camera trap studies have been running for years in regions where these creatures are rumored to live, but so far, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Instead, the supposed proof of Bigfoot or the Yeti often comes from blurry photos or shaky videos taken by individuals who claim to have encountered them. The scientific understanding of biology also makes the existence of Bigfoot highly unlikely. Often described as a great ape, Bigfoot would have had to evolve in North America. However, great apes evolved in Africa, and the only great ape to make it to the Americas is Homo sapiens, whose ancestors crossed the Bering Strait only about 16,000 years ago. This is far too short a time for a new species like Bigfoot to have evolved. While it may be disappointing for these mysterious creature enthusiasts, the scientific evidence points firmly toward the conclusion that creatures like Bigfoot and the Yeti are more fantasy than reality. After decades of extensive scientific research, it's safe to say that yes, science has solved the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster, and it's pure fiction. So, what do you think?
The legend goes that a dwarf named Fafnir was famous for his strength and courage. Because of his qualities, he was tasked with protecting their kingdom. Dwarves were known to gather a lot of wealth, so a bit of added security was a must. I mean, they lived in a house made from gold and precious gems. But Fafnir also had another special talent. He was able to shapeshift. Tricked by Loki, the Norse spirit of mischief, Fafnir was taken over by his greed and the shine of his father's treasure. He decided he did not want to share any of it, not even with his father or his brothers. He stole it and ran away all by himself to a place he'd be hard to find, the middle of the desert. To protect his wealth, Fafnir transformed into a huge dragon. His new appearance looked like a huge snake, powerful and scary. His magical powers did not end there though. Because the dragon couldn't fly, he also spread poison all around his new home, so no one had a chance to survive if they wanted to take his gold away. Fafnir was soon defeated by a young hero named Sigurd. The legend of Fafnir tries to explain why family is more important than greed. It also shows the many magical powers dragons possess. But the most interesting part is that it's quite a good example of how dragons came to be in our tales. But hey, this is just one of the many stories mentioning dragons. Just switch on your TV or peek into any bookstore, and you'll surely stumble upon dragons somewhere. Variations of dragon-like creatures have been described in stories from all over the world, from Asia to Northern Europe. Most of these creatures are depicted with reptile-like bodies, wings, and claws. And the scariest trait of them all, they can breathe fire out of their mouths. The name of these creatures comes from the Latin word draconum, which translates to huge serpent. But let's take a trip down memory lane to see how it all started. An Asian historian, for example, discovered some fossils back in the 4th century BCE and decided that he'd stumbled upon dragons. It's easy to understand why he got so confused if you look at a fossilized Stegosaurus. It was 30 feet long, 14 feet tall, and covered in armored plates and spikes. The Nile crocodile might have gotten mistaken for a dragon too. It still exists today and lives in sub-Saharan Africa, but it may have been more popular in ancient times. When reaching maturity, Nile crocodiles can grow up to 18 feet long. But that's not all. It can even walk with its body off the ground, and some were even pictured standing on their 2 back legs. Goannas are dragon-like lizards that live in Australia. Large as they are, they also have razor-sharp teeth and claws, and are also known to even produce venom. It's easy to see why goannas may be the source for the Australian version of dragons. When humans first discovered whale bones back in the day, we had no idea these animals lived in the sea. Given their size, we surely must have thought they were dangerous. And because we rarely see whales, if we don't go underwater of course, they were poorly understood and easily mistaken for dragons too. Probably the most interesting source of dragon mythology is actually the human brain. In a book called An Instinct for Dragons, there was a theory which claimed that dragons existed in almost all ancient cultures because we had evolved to fear large predators to survive. We aren't the only mammals to do this. Monkeys have an innate fear of snakes and large cats too, for example. When you combine these natural traits with folklore, you get a lot of dragon stories everywhere, adapted to each region. Reptilian beasts with magical powers date back as far as the origins of human civilization itself. I'm talking about ancient Mesopotamia. Humans back then used to believe in all sorts of creatures, but their head spirit was Marduk, the patron of the city of Babylon. If you look at the artwork from back then, Marduk was depicted with a snake-like dragon at his side. It could be either nice or vengeful, depending on what mood it was in. If you want to sign up to become a dragon, the first thing they'll ask you at the interview will be if you can breathe fire, of course. So scientists have tried to look into some ways that could make it real for dragons to breathe out fire without damaging their throats. To do that, they examined the bombardier beetle. This eccentric insect can pack up some really hot substances in its belly. Once the creature gets bothered by something, it shoots out a fiery load of chemicals. In all fairness, it's not really fire, but it does burn, so it's close enough. Going back to dragons, they'd need to have similar glands in their throats to produce the same effect. But where do dragons come from? They didn't just appear out of nowhere, regardless of the source you consult. Some tales, like that of Fafnir, say that even humans can turn into dragons. But the most popular theory is that dragons start out as eggs. Some sources even draft a series of stages a dragon has to go through during its life. Everything starts with hatching. Dragons are said to eat their way out of those shells and break the sides of the egg. Then there's the wormling stage, which is what dragon specialists, or dragonologists if you like, call a newly hatched dragon. It's still small and weak, but don't worry, it can take care of itself pretty well. The rest of a dragon's life stages are pretty self-explanatory. There are grown-up dragons, then ancient ones. A dragon's life ends when it reaches the twilight stage. Some sources claim dragons never stopped growing. Others even say they never reach the end of their lives. They just pass on to another type of spiritual existence.
So a team of archaeologists digging in the far north of Zambia stumbled upon something that could change all we know about early humans. Was it a Walkman? Nah. It's a wooden structure built around 500,000 years ago, the oldest of its kind on Earth. The construction consists of 2 logs that had been shaped to fit together, something like Lincoln logs, those toy building sets. There's no chance that the 2 logs could have just drifted along the river and merged in that shape naturally. They were carved with sharp tools before Homo sapiens, or modern humans, appeared in Africa. Researchers don't know which species of ancient humans could manage to create something like this, but they were pretty great at planning and maybe even used some language to discuss their construction projects. It also means we can't be so sure that Stone Age folks were just wandering nomads. They might have been more settled down than we thought, with enough resources to stick around in one place. Finding wooden stuff from the Stone Age is like looking for a needle in a haystack, because it decomposes over time, much like Beethoven. But this one was found near Colombo Falls, near the border of Zambia and Tanzania. The construction might have been a walkway, a firewood or food storage spot, or a base for shelter. It was preserved so well in waterlogged sediments that have no oxygen and kept the construction fresh. The discovery has marks left from tools that were used to make the two pieces fit together. Archaeologists also dug up 4 ancient wooden tools at a site: a wedge, a digging stick, a chopped log, and a branch with a notch, all dated back to over 300,000 years ago. Scientists analyzed minerals in the sand around the goodies they found and used a technique called luminescence dating to tell the age of the finds. Experts believe that they should study more waterlogged sites because they could have more examples of ancient woodworking. Archaeologists have to be really careful while working with these finds not to damage the delicate wood, so they use plastic tools. The team that found the construction had to keep the wood wet so it wouldn't lose traces of human activity or break. They took it to the UK to study in special tanks for underwater photography. There, they made 3D models of the wood. The earliest wooden artifact found so far is a piece of polished plank from Israel, which is over 780,000 years old. There were also some wooden tools for foraging aged 400,000 years, but none of these finds are as progressive as the wooden construction in Africa. Scientists found cotton fibers from the ancient Near East that are 7,000 years old, the oldest of their kind. The place where they were found is like a time capsule, with mud brick buildings with all sorts of ancient goodies, giving us a peek into what life was like back then. They've already found signs of ancient parties with spots for stashing food. Usually, stuff from this era turns to dust, but thanks to fancy microscopes, experts can dive deep into the sediment collected from the site and uncover all sorts of organic remnants, including these cotton threads. People used to think the fabrics here were made from local plants, but it looks like this cotton might have traveled all the way from the Indus region, which is modern-day Pakistan. The ancient village of Tel Saf might have been more connected than we thought, part of some international trade network. There's more evidence backing up this idea, like beads from Anatolia, Romania, and Egypt, and pottery from other countries. The oldest known leather shoe that was found so far was waiting for 5,500 years in a cave in present-day Armenia. A British archaeologist stumbled upon this gem under a busted jar at the bottom of a pit. Alongside the shoe was a deer's shoulder blade, wild goat horns, a fish vertebra, and some scattered pottery shards. The shoe itself is pretty simple, made from a single piece of cowhide wrapped around the right foot, held together with a leather lace running through eyelets. To keep its shape, they stuffed some grass inside. Scientists are not sure who rocked this shoe, but they use radiocarbon dating to figure out its age along with the grass stuffing. These shoes look a lot like the ones folks still wear today on Ireland's Aran Islands. The same tech and methods used to make these shoes stuck around in Europe until the middle of the 20th century. Near Leipzig, diggers found a grave from about 2,500 years before the current era, packed with over 100 dog teeth, all lined up neat and tidy. These teeth could have been a part of a fancy flap for a handbag. The leather or fabric that was holding it together must have disappeared over centuries. If it's true, that would be the oldest purse in the world, all the way from the Stone Age. Using dog teeth and hair ornaments and necklaces for both women and men was, trendy back then, according to experts. Whoever was the owner of the purse must have had a high social status, judging by the number of materials used to make it, not counting all the toothless dogs. It looks like the oldest musical instruments ever crafted by humans are ancient flutes made of bird bone and mammoth ivory. They were discovered in a cave down south in Germany, a place showing early signs of modern humans settling in Europe. Using carbon dating wizardry, the scientists pinned the flute's age at around 42,000 years old. According to the experts, these musical doodads might have been used for fun or during religious ceremonies. Some experts believe that music might have helped us build bigger social circles and expand our territory compared to the Neanderthals. Those guys faded into history about 30,000 years ago. In 2020, a team of scientists found a string a quarter of an inch long in France. Archaeologists unearthed a cord fragment next to a stone tool. Such twisted fibers could have been used for everything from making clothes to fishing nets. In prehistory, there was some advanced tech, and the Neanderthals seemed to have mastered it. Scientists already knew that these early humans made tar from birch bark and that they produced shell beads. There's even evidence of Neanderthal art. The string section and similar finds prove that our ancestors from many thousands of years ago weren't as primitive as they're often shown in popular culture. Back in the 19th century, the French found a broken slab of black granite from 196 before the current era. The stone contained one text in 3 scripts: ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Demotic. A French philologist was the first to crack the code. He successfully matched the Greek letters with the ones in the Egyptian script, and we were finally able to read hieroglyphs. The name of the piece of granite that made all this possible was the Rosetta Stone. With its help, among other things, scientists managed to decipher papyrus records on how the pyramids in Egypt were built. A British archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, excavated a vast palace complex at Knossos in the early 20th century. This was the center of Minoan culture. The palace had over 1,000 rooms with colorful paintings of dolphins, griffins, and bulls. But their biggest find was at first overlooked: thousands of slabs of baked clay. The fire that brought down the palace helped preserve the tablets. No one could read the slabs as they were in some unknown language. The scientific community had to wait for another half a century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was an English architect and cryptographer who studied Greek and Latin. He found that the script was an archaic form of Greek. It was the oldest deciphered language in Europe, Linear B. During the Late Bronze Age, the Greek civilization that used the script vanished. Well, hey there! We dive back in time and into the oceans over 500 million years ago, just, because we can. Whoa! Watch out! It's not Megalodon or giant sea reptiles you need to look out for here. It's a bizarre, unearthly-looking creature called a Nummulite. The name means unlike any other shrimp, and I think you'll agree, it looks like a nightmarish cross between a shrimp and a modern-day centipede. 2 tentacles protruding from its face, each lined with razor-sharp teeth. Oh yeah, and this thing was about the size of your leg. With a wave-like movement of the flaps on each side of its body, it was graceful for a terrifying creature. It was also more advanced than any other life on this planet at the time. Especially those huge eyes. You have only one lens in each of yours. This giant shrimp had 16,000. That's 4 times more than a common housefly. And you know how good their vision is. Good enough to dodge that swatter every time. All this allowed Annie to become one of the first animals on this planet to feed on others. Yep, here it is. Earth's first hunter. Its favorite meal? Trilobites. Hey, try a bite. Those are the ancient ancestors of crabs. Some of their fossils have marks on them in the same shape as the monster shrimp's mouthparts. Terrors of the past like this got to be so giant thanks to more oxygen in the atmosphere. A perfect example of this, Megaraptors. Imagine a dragonfly. Now make it as big as a cat, and with a wingspan longer than your arm. Megan, the monster-sized dragonfly, could easily grab other insects or even small animals, and she ruled the air with quick movements. Back then, there were still no large birds or other airborne enemies for this behemoth bug, so it was safe and free to grow as large as this planet would allow. Piranhas of the past were also jumbo-sized. Mega piranha was about 3 times the size of the river terrors we have today. Its bite force was about the same as a tiger's, and those striped kitties bite down 2 times harder than lions. That means it probably not only dined on other fish and any land creatures that, got too close to the water, but it could also easily crunch down on large turtles and other unlucky shelled creatures. And fun fact, modern-day piranhas bark like dogs when they're about to enter a confrontation. It actually sounds more like a frog's ribbit. But makes you wonder, what did this mega-sized ancient cousin sound like? A bear roaring? How about giant sea scorpions the size of your bed? Go back about 460 million years and you'd see them swimming under you. And watch out for that tail. Scientists still don't know if these creatures could use it to inject venom like your standard land scorpion, but something tells me I wouldn't want that thing anywhere near me. Then there's this guy, Therizinosaurus. Terry looks sort of like a goose with long arms. Oh, and did I mention this goose dino is about 2 stories tall and longer than a bus? Yow! Its arms make the T-Rexes look even more bite-sized, each 8 feet long, almost triple the length of T-Rexes. And on the end, razor-sharp claws the size of your whole arm. Now, don't worry about those lengthy claws too much, though. Terry probably used them to cut through giant termite nests. So, this huge reptilian goose was more interested in eating bugs and plants. Another mega monster for you, Megatherium. The giant ground sloth could look a giraffe straight in the eye and weighed as much as a hippo. It moved mainly on its hind legs and used its massive tail as support. He had huge paws with colossal knife-sized claws. The sloth could use them to defend itself from enemies and to bend tree branches in search of food. But the biggest danger to the giant ground sloth wasn't dinosaurs or saber-toothed tigers. It was our own species. Yep, humans showed up just in time to meet this fellow and to, eat him up. Titanoboa was a terrifying 50-foot snake, as long as the great Megalodon itself. It was also more than 2 times heavier than the heavyweight champion among snakes today, the green anaconda. Crocodiles were a regular on this serpent's menu. Titanoboa could swim 3 times faster than the fastest Olympic swimmer our species has ever seen. It was quicker and more dangerous in the water than outside it. And don't forget the boa part of its name. This massive snake wasn't venomous. Instead, it liked to squeeze. Remember that giant shrimp from earlier? Well, Opabenia looks like its teeny-tiny finger-sized cousin. And instead of 2 toothy tentacles, this thing had a vacuum hose coming out of its face. On the end of that trunk, what looks like a single crab claw. Add 5 eyes and a mouth under its head, and you've got a recipe for something not of this planet. Only it is. This creature used its trunk like an elephant does. Its claw grabbed food from the bottom of the ocean and brought it up to its mouth. This thing is so weird-looking that, apparently, when the scientists who discovered it presented his findings to an audience, they all laughed as if he were joking. Now, a real-life monster, the Tully Monster. From a distance, it looks a bit like Nessie, that long neck and teeth-lined jaws. But get closer, and you'll see it's more like a long nose with a mouth attached at the end, like a mosquito. Its eyes are further back, sticking out of tubes all snail-like. Tully was an ancient mollusk, about the size of your forearm. It probably dined on jellyfish and shrimp 300 million years ago. Thylacus smilus will put a smile on your face as long as you don't get too close. No, it's not a relative of the saber-toothed tiger. It was a marsupial, making it more related to a kangaroo than anything. And if you compare them to body size, its fangs were actually longer than a saber-toothed tiger's. And they grew continuously. As for that beard on its chin, that's actually all chin. The lower jawbone grew down to a point under the mouth. Those fangs were rooted to the skull, going way back to its eyes. When the mouth was closed, that bony beard protected the long, sharp teeth from breakage. Staganapolis, not to be confused with Minneapolis, might look like a big crocodile with a squished-in snout, but it was mostly harmless. Its small head and very few teeth meant the reptile didn't have much to work with when protecting itself. That's what all those armored scales were for, and no need for huge fangs or long rows of razor-sharp teeth when you're a plant eater. That beak-like tip on its nose allowed the stag to dig up plants. So, really, this reptile was more like a 10-foot scaly pig than a croc. Basilosaurus was a type of ancient whale that lived on our planet about 45 million years ago. Not quite as long as a blue whale, but this guy was still big enough to munch down on other whales and even sharks. Some people believe these monsters could still exist today. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen a giant sea dragon, and Basilosaurus fits the description. Plus, 90% of our oceans are unexplored. There's plenty of space to hide a sea monster. But scientists haven't found any fossils of this ancient whale younger than 3.7 million years. So, this myth is busted. Stegosaurus is one of the most recognizable dinosaurs that ever lived. It can easily be distinguished by those huge spikes on its tail and the bony plates on its back. It was twice as long as a giraffe and nearly 5 times heavier. But compared to its body size, it had the world's smallest brain. It was no larger than a dog's. Pelagornis had the largest wingspan of any bird ever discovered. It was twice the size of the largest bird today, the wandering albatross. Such huge wings made it hard for the bird to take off. It could only do so by jumping off cliffs. And when it finally spread its wings, this giant could only go about 40 miles per hour. The fastest bird today can reach speeds 5 times that. In July 1990, 4 Czech guys decided to go on an adventure to find the Mongolian death worm, the creature that might have inspired the monster you've seen in the movie Doom. They say it lives somewhere deep in the Gobi Desert. So they flew to Mongolia, hopped into an ATV, and hired some local guides to help them. All that to meet a creature that is up to 6 feet long, can spit acid that could melt anything, and is capable of shooting electricity at those it doesn't like. Legend says that these friendly guys spend most of their days hiding underneath the sandy dunes, but they like to come out during the wetter months of June and July. So the timing for a spotting was simply perfect. But the crew needed to figure out how to lure the creature. Sadly for them, no one knew what the giant worm liked to eat. So they built a thumper, which is a machine that made rhythmic pounding noises. They were hoping it would call the worm out of the ground. For 2 months, they searched the vast desert, crossing dunes and rocky plains, looking for any sign of the creature. But alas, it didn't really work out. Ivan McCurley, who was the leader of the 1990 expedition, came back to Gobi Desert again. He once tried to attract the megaworm with blasts, and the second time he used a small airplane to scout the dunes. Over the years, groups from America, Britain, and New Zealand organized big expeditions to the Gobi Desert to try and find the creature. Many others came from all around the world on their own and found nothing. The people in the West first found out about the megaworm of the Gobi Desert thanks to an American paleontologist, Roy Chapman Andrews. This brave man was probably the inspiration for Indiana Jones. In 1926, he wrote about the creature in his book. At a meeting with Mongolian leaders, Andrews heard detailed descriptions of the creature, even though none of them had ever seen it themselves. One of them described it as looking like a sausage, about 2 feet long, with no head or legs. According to him, the worm was so venomous that just touching it could instantly take your life, and it lived in the loneliest parts of the Gobi Desert. Andrews didn't think the creature was real, but he shared these stories again in another book. In May 2005, 4 friends from Great Britain who search for monsters professionally decided to try their luck. They made drawings of the worm and hired local people to hand out flyers all over the Gobi Desert. These flyers offered a reward to anyone who could give information about the worm or even bring them a specimen. They thought loud sounds that other explorers tried would scare the beast away. Some told them it likes damp conditions. So they came up with a plan to block streams of water to create wet areas that would lure the worm out. Their plan didn't work because it was too hard to build dams in the desert. They ended up using small traps, but didn't find any actual proof that the worm existed. But they did meet locals who shared interesting stories about strange creatures they had seen over 70 years. Over the years, stories of the monster spread around the world. In some of them, it's only 1 foot long. In others, it's as large as a human. It's white-gray or scaly and brown, or maybe fleshy and bright red. Someone said it resembled a snake, or maybe a caterpillar, or maybe it has wings and can fly. And some believe it could be a supernatural evil being without a body. Maybe the stories are so different, and the search operations are so fruitless, because the creature doesn't even exist. Or it could be one of many cryptids. Those creatures like Bigfoot, Yeti, the Loch Ness Monster, their existence has yet to be proven. In 1983, one scientist who was visiting the region heard that an old man had managed to catch the mysterious worm. He also learned there was a nest nearby. The scientist bravely approached the hole in the sand and put his hand inside. A giant creature dragged him in, and he was never seen again. Just kidding. He actually found a Tartar sand boa inside. It's a chunky, burrowing, non-venomous snake that has small eyes and gray-brown scales. He showed it to the locals to verify if it was the monster, and supposedly all of them said yes. Most Mongolians who know about the worm still believe it's real. Now, even though people call our supposed monster a worm, it's just what it sounds like in the English translation. Many Mongol cultures have used this word for centuries to refer to any animals they thought to be really dangerous, especially snakes, even non-venomous ones. So, it doesn't have to be a literal worm after all. Worms are soft and squishy, but a creature living in the harsh Gobi Desert would need to be tougher, more like a snake or a type of lizard without legs. Neither of these creatures can shoot electricity or spit acid like they say the death worm does. But some snakes, like cobras, can spit venom that's dangerous for people. If it were real, the creature would have a backbone, and explorers searching for it would likely find some bones or evidence left behind. And there are actually fossil remains all over the Gobi Desert. Scientists found representatives of over 80 dino groups here over the last almost 100 years. It all started with the world's first dinosaur egg nests. This discovery changed all the scientists knew about dinos. It was the first proof they laid eggs. In the following 2 years, the same expedition team unearthed over 100 dinosaurs and took them to the American Museum of Natural History, where you can still see them today. Some of them were swimming around in the Cretaceous Sea that used to be here about 71 million years ago. They resembled modern birds. The mystery of the megaworm is still unsolved, but there used to be another mystery scientists finally managed to explain. Back in the 13th century, a famous traveler, Marco Polo, not the guy from the swimming pool game, crossed the Gobi Desert. He thought he could hear mysterious noises, like the sounds of musical instruments such as drums. He wrote about it in his book and believed he might be hearing the voices of restless spirits. Scientists call these noises singing sands or booming sands. Unlike the squeaky sound you might hear when walking on a sandy beach, these desert sounds are much louder, like a musical instrument playing deep, haunting notes. Over the years, people came up with all kinds of ideas about what caused the sounds, like underground water or winds making the sand vibrate. Not all dunes can do this, and scientists wanted to figure out why. Sometimes the winds might cause a small avalanche on the side of a dune, and then you can hear the magical sound start. But this is rare. So, to study it, scientists had to help the dunes sing. They climbed to the top of a dune and slid down on their backs, using their hands and feet to push sand down. As the sand tumbled, the sound started softly and got louder. They could even feel the vibrations with their hands. So they found out that for a dune to sing, a few special things need to happen. The grains of sand must be the right shape. The dune has to be big, and the sand must be very dry, so no singing after it rains. Inside the dune, there's a hard layer of packed sand that acts like a giant speaker. This layer bounces the sound waves back and forth, makes the noise louder and louder and creates a haunting melody that can fill the desert air. In other words, the dunes can play tunes. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't help myself with that one.
In a frosty Canadian park, hidden deep beneath layers of thick ice, scientists discovered a bizarre skeleton they named the Frozen Dragon. The skeleton had been in the frozen ice for millions of years. It took experts decades to work out the species of this strange fossil. It was identified as a new genus of pterosaur. Pterosaurs were massive flying reptiles with wingspans of over 16 feet. Their heads were 3.5 times the size of their bodies. Pterosaurs lived 76 million years ago when they soared above the dinosaurs. Scientists described them as the biggest, meanest, and most bizarre animals that ever flew. The new genus has been named Cryodragon boreas, which translates to Frozen Dragon of the North Winds. In 2013, a young mountaineer was climbing one of the tallest mountains in Western Europe, Mont Blanc. He noticed a strange metal box poking out of the snow. The mountaineer pried the box open and found that it was filled with precious rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. The climber immediately handed the box to the authorities. It was discovered that the box likely belonged to a passenger on one of 2 flights from India that crashed into the mountain over 50 years ago. The box was valued to be worth over $200,000, and authorities are still searching for the heir to the small box of treasures. In northwest Siberia in 2007, a reindeer herder was on an outing with his sons when he noticed something strange in the ice. The man realized it was a frozen mammoth calf and immediately contacted the local museum. The calf was named Luba and was the best preserved mammoth mummy in the world at the time of its discovery. Luba had been in the ice for 41,800 years and is around 30 to 35 days old. From trunk to tail, the mammoth calf is roughly the same size as a large calf. If you're interested in seeing for yourself, Luba travels to museums all around the world. On the frozen continent of Antarctica, covered in layers of ice and snow, is Mount Erebus, the frozen volcano. The volcano was discovered in the middle of an eruption in 1841 by explorers on an Arctic expedition. The volcano is over 12,000 feet tall and has been active for the last 1.3 million years. Deep within the middle of the volcano is a huge crater filled with large volumes of molten lava. The volcano has occasional explosions, which means it's classified as being in continuing eruption. However, these eruptions are nothing to worry about because they're generally rather small. Back in 1991, 2 hikers were traveling across the Italian Alps when they stumbled across a body that they presumed to belong to a recently lost hiker. The duo trudged back down the mountain to report their unfortunate findings. Once the remains were recovered, it was clear that the body was not recent at all. Scientists determined that the Iceman was more than 5,000 years old and named him Otzi. The discovery was unlike anything scientists had ever before seen because the body was so well preserved. For years, Otzi was studied by scientists who discovered that our ancestors have a lot more in common with us than we ever knew before. Otzi was covered in ink body art. Research done on the contents of his stomach revealed that his last meal was dry-cured meat, similar to the bacon we eat today. Otzi has at least 19 relatives living today, somewhere in Central Europe. Scientists were researching ancient squirrel burrows in Siberia when they came across something interesting. One of the squirrels had hidden away precious seeds deep beneath the ground. The seeds had been encased in ice for 32,000 years. The seeds were for the flower Silene stenophilia, which had long since gone extinct. Amazingly, scientists were able to recover plant tissue from inside the seeds and grow an entire crop of flowers. They've since reintroduced the previously extinct flower to natural habitats all across the world. In 1930, a team of Norwegian scientists sailed around the Arctic Ocean, conducting research on the seas and glaciers. They reached White Island, a dangerous and icy land no human had set foot on before, or so they thought. The scientists were shocked to discover the tip of a small boat sticking out of the snow. Frozen inside the boat, they found scientific equipment and various personal items, including a jacket monogrammed S.A. Andre. They had discovered the wreck of the famous Andre Arctic balloon expedition. In 1897, Swedish explorers, led by Andre, attempted to travel to the North Pole by hydrogen balloon. No one had ever heard from them ever again. People only found out what happened to them when the wreck was discovered 33 years later. It turns out that the balloon had crashed on White Island only 2 days after departing from Sweden. The explorers traveled along the island on a small makeshift boat, but were unable to make it any further. The best preserved woolly mammoth ever found was discovered in an area of permafrost in Siberia in 2010. Scientists named the frozen mammoth Yucca, after the small village near where it was found. Yucca had been frozen for 39,000 years and is thought to have been around 6 to 8 years old. Because Yucca is so well preserved, it has been studied for years and provided new information about mammoths. In 2019, scientists reported that they were able to activate cells taken from Yucca's tissue. Maybe one day we'll have woolly mammoths roaming the land. From looking at pictures and videos of Antarctica, the continent appears to be freezing cold, covered in snow, and flat, except for a few small hills. Scientists believe that too. When studying the Gomburtsev Mountains in the early 2000s, they were shocked to discover that the small rocky hills were actually the peak of a gigantic mountain formation under a mile of snow. Using radar technology, researchers worked out that the mountains are really around 10,000 feet tall and sprawl across 750 miles. This is around the same size as the European Alps, except hidden under tons of ice and snow. At a gold mine in Siberia, a businessman was examining a nearby river when he noticed something interesting in the frost. It was a small woolly rhino calf that was later named Sasha. The woolly rhino has been extinct for 15,000 years. It's thought that Sasha could have been frozen in the ice for up to 39,000 years. Sasha is unique because it's the only full-body woolly rhino to have ever been discovered. Glaciers around the northern Italian town of Pelo have begun to melt. Artifacts from decades and even centuries ago have been discovered pouring out of the ice. Personal belongings from soldiers have been found, things like diaries, photographs, and even love letters. Historians have even uncovered an entire cabin preserved beneath the ice. The cabin was filled with hard metal helmets and clothes. In 1845, Sir John Franklin embarked on an ill-fated expedition to the North Pole. The crew traveled on 2 ships, HMS Erebus and the ironically named HMS Terror. The expedition met with disaster, and both ships were lost to the icy waters. In 2016, the HMS Terror was discovered by a team of researchers. Despite being lost for 170 years, the freezing cold waters had maintained the ship in pristine condition. Scientists described the ship as frozen in time. Dinner plates and glasses were still on shelves, beds and desks were still in order, and even the passengers' luggage appeared to be in good condition. The HMS Erebus was also discovered nearby, but due to changing water conditions, the ship wasn't in great shape. The glacial ice surrounding a mountain passageway in Norway that was notoriously used by the Vikings has revealed hundreds of ancient artifacts. One of these artifacts was a giant unopened wooden box that was welded together. Researchers were beside themselves with anticipation, waiting to open this box. They believed it would be filled with Viking treasures or artifacts that would give us an insight into ancient society. When they opened the box, all that was inside was a plain old beeswax candle. It turns out that this box wasn't actually as old as they thought it was. By analyzing the candle, they discovered that the box dates back to the 17th century. The age of the Vikings had ended by the 11th century. It's likely that the candle box belonged to a farmer who was shipping it from his summer farm to